The Alpha's Broken Mate. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Reinhardt. Chapter 1, When He Called Me Luna. The twin moons hung heavy over the cliffs of Lumarich, casting the world in silver and ash. From the highest garden of the Silver Flame Palace, the wind carried the scent of rain-soaked stone and blooming dusk roses, delicate white things that only bloomed under Luna Prima's gaze. Valenne stood beneath the arching pillars of the starlight terrace, her silver hair caught in the breeze like trailing silk, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the mountains bled into mist. She'd worn white tonight, not for the ceremony, but because it was the color of beginnings and endings. Behind her, footsteps. Not rushed. Not hesitant. She turned before he spoke. Rian. He looked like the night had been molded into a man. His dark hair, cropped short, gleamed faintly beneath the moonlight. The high collar of his royal coat framed a face as unreadable as carved obsidian. But his amber eyes burned when they found her. "I thought you wouldn't come," she said softly. "I almost didn't." His voice was quiet, too quiet, but something curled beneath it, something frayed and real. "The others are still at the feast. They'll miss us." "They always do," she murmured. She had seen him 100 times in these halls. In training grounds. At court meetings. But never like this. Never unguarded, never under Luna's light with no audience but shadows and stars. He stepped toward her, his fingers brushing hers. She didn't flinch. "Tomorrow," she said, heart skipping, "I become Luna." He tilted his head. "You already are." A breath caught between them. The air seemed to bend with tension, with that fragile, electric thing that existed in the space between almost and already. His thumb ran over the back of her hand, slowly, like memorizing something he feared forgetting. "I don't know what the council will say. What my brother will plot. But I do know this," Rian's voice dipped, rough and intimate, "I'd rather let fate go wrong than let you slip through my fingers." Valenne's throat tightened. Her chest fluttered with something reckless and bright, a hunger she'd never dared name. "You don't believe in fate." No, his gaze dropped to her mouth. "But I believe in you." The words wrapped around her like a promise, warm and dangerous. A vow no one else could hear. He leaned closer, close enough that his breath stirred the hair at her temple, close enough that she felt the heat radiating from his skin. Her heart beat so loud she was sure the stones beneath them could hear it. She was the first to speak. "Say it." He blinked, lips parting. "Say what?" "Say what I am." He took her hand fully then, turning her palm upward, pressing his mouth against the soft skin just below her wrist, a kiss not of lust, but of possession. "My Luna," he breathed. "Mine." Her knees almost buckled. The world narrowed to the pulse beneath her skin, the weight of his voice, the way his eyes never left hers even as the wind howled around them. She should have feared this moment. Should have doubted it. Should have reminded herself that love and power were often made of lies. But instead she smiled. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear that." Rian touched her cheek, reverent. "Tomorrow, let them bow. Tonight, you're mine alone." They did not kiss. They did not need to. Something stronger passed between them, not the bite of the mate bond, but something quieter. Choice. When she left him there under the moons, she did not look back. She didn't need to. She believed, wholly, foolishly, that she would never walk alone again. The path down to the Hall of Ancients was lined with flame bowls and trailing runes, ancient symbols of allegiance and right. Valenne passed them in silence, her ceremonial cloak trailing behind her like spilled moonlight. The guards bowed as she walked. The priestesses whispered prayers. The night smelled of cold fire and iron. She stopped before the tomb doors. The resting place of her mother, once Luna herself. The chamber was empty save for the soft burning of sacred oils and a circle of ancestral stones. Valenne knelt before the largest one, fingers curled against the marble floor. "I thought I would be afraid," she whispered. The silence swallowed her. "I'm not." The words felt true and false all at once. Her hands trembled. Her voice did not. "They told me I had to be chosen by the wolves, by the bloodline, by the council. But you told me the Luna chooses herself." Valenne pressed her forehead to the stone. "I will make you proud, mother." A breeze touched her cheek. A trick of the tomb or a blessing, she didn't know. She didn't care. Tomorrow, she would stand before the realm as Luna. Tomorrow, Rian would take her hand and call her by name. Tomorrow, everything would begin. Chapter 2, The Name They Cut From Me. The bells of the Silver Flame Palace tolled 8 times, solemn, hollow, and high. Each strike echoed like a heartbeat through the corridors, down to the ivory-veined floors of the Coronation Temple, where the walls themselves shimmered with ancient runes and the scent of sacred myrrh. Valenne stood at the base of the moonstep dais, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her like winter mist. Her silver hair had been combed, bound in the crescent pattern of a Luna to be, each strand threaded with moonstone chain. The Luna crest, shaped like a coiled wolf with 2 crescent moons for eyes, waited atop a velvet cushion held by a priestess in crimson robes. It was time. She barely heard the rustle of the court gathering behind her, nobles cloaked in white and gold, priests chanting the vows in old Lupin, the soft scrape of metal boots from the guards flanking the central aisle. She saw only him. Rian. He stood at the top of the dais, in full regalia, a silver-embroidered coat, his sword of lineage sheathed at his side, dark eyes fixed on her. There was no smile this time. No flicker of warmth. Still, she believed. He was a prince. Composure was his mask. But beneath it, she knew the man who had whispered "My Luna" beneath the moons. Who had kissed her wrist as if vowing his soul. She climbed the stairs toward him, heart pounding, not with nerves, but with a strange kind of awe. This moment was not borrowed. It was earned. It was hers. She reached the top step. The wind from the open dome above caught the edge of her veil and lifted it, revealing the mark on her collarbone, a small white burn in the shape of a crescent. Proof of her completed moon mirror rite. Proof that her wolf had answered. Elder Corwin stepped forward, scroll in hand. "Before the twin moons, before blood and bond, we call the name Valenne Cyralis to be recognized as rightful Luna of the Silverflame Court." His voice rang clear. Until another cut through it like frost. "I contest the name." The words rang from the hall like a slap. A hush swept over the chamber. Heads turned. Valenne froze, her breath caught mid-lung. At the base of the stairs stood a figure draped in ivory and pearls, her curls gilded gold, lips painted wine red. Mireia. She was not supposed to be here. Valenne's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" Mireia smiled, the kind of smile you give just before plunging the knife. "I bring proof," she said sweetly, "that Valenne Cyralis falsified her bloodline documentation. She was born not of the royal lines of the high clans, but of a low-born servant from the Velmore outer rings." A gasp. Then silence. Valenne took a single step forward. "That's a lie." "She forged her right clearance," Mireia continued, turning to the gathered nobles. "And bribed an elder to mark her with the crest. She is no Luna. She is a fraud, groomed to deceive this court." A murmur rose from the crowd, disbelieving, uncertain. Valenne felt it like the crack of lightning in her bones. "I passed the rite," she said, voice steady. "My wolf answered me." "Then let it answer again." Mireia's eyes gleamed. "Strip her collar and test her now, in front of us all." Valenne turned, not to the crowd, not to the priests, but to Rian. He was watching her with a gaze that no longer burned. no longer held her. It was distant. Careful. Cold. Her heart stopped. "Tell them," she whispered. He said nothing. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a tremor. "Rian. You know me. Say something." Still, silence. The priestess lowered the crest cushion. Elder Corwin's jaw was rigid. "Prince Rian. As the acting alpha of the court, do you refute or uphold the claim?" Valenne waited. The entire hall waited. Rian's gaze flicked to the assembly, then back to her. And she saw it, the calculation. The retreat. The retreat from her. The retreat from them. Finally, he spoke. "In light of these allegations," he said, "boys as smooth and merciless as polished glass, and to uphold the integrity of our rights, I request the coronation be paused until a formal investigation is complete." It didn't register at first. The words. Paused. Investigation. But it was the absence of something that hurt more. He did not say her name. He didn't say Valenne. He didn't say mine. He simply turned and stepped back, folding his hands behind his back, a prince again. An alpha of order. And she stood beneath 100 watching eyes, silver hair loose, palms open, her soul unclothed in front of the court. The priestess stepped aside. The dais was cleared. Guards moved forward. She looked at her hand. The one that had almost touched his. The one that had once been kissed. She did not cry. She did not scream. She only whispered, as the priestesses removed her veil and her name from the ceremony scroll. "You said you wanted me." And he didn't even look back. Chapter 3, Mireia Wears My Smile. They took the Luna crest from her neck with the same hands that had once fastened it there. Valenne sat perfectly still as the two court aides unclasped the silver chain. Their fingers were gentle, even apologetic, as if softness could make up for the shame. The pendant left a ghost of weight against her collarbone. Her skin tingled where it had lain, not with heat, but absence. She didn't move. Didn't speak. What was there to say? "You said I was your Luna. You called me yours." Instead, she stared at the opposite wall, where the paint peeled in long, flaking strokes. The chamber smelled of lavender water and old dust, the quiet rot of unused rooms. This place, tucked beneath the palace's inner wing, was once meant for junior priestesses and disfavored daughters, a place to be hidden, not heard. Now it held her. No guards were stationed outside her door. She had not been chained. No one screamed at her or spat curses. Her prison was silence, and that, somehow, was worse. The only sound came from beyond the narrow window carved into the stone wall, high and small, like something meant for moonlight to reach but never hope. From there, she could hear the outer court stirring. Rustling footsteps. The low rumble of distant voices. Ceremony bells. They had not cancelled the assembly. She rose slowly, each movement a whisper of fabric and bone. Her nightgown clung to her legs, soft linen gone stiff at the seams from a night spent curled on the stone mattress. The window was just high enough that she had to lift onto the balls of her feet to see. Her fingers braced against the ledge. Beyond the window, the palace shone. The outer courtyard was ringed with flame bowls and silver standards, their tips gleaming under Luna Prima's light. The high platform, once meant for her coronation, still stood, unchanged, uncaring. The banners bearing the crest of the royal house had not been taken down. But it was not her banner that drew her eye. It was her gown. Her breath caught. There, standing at the top of the stairs, was Mireia. The very same ceremonial robes, white velvet lined with silver threading, embroidered by the temple seers, hung over her frame like a second skin. The veil, once tailored to fit Valenne's silver hair, now sat over Mireia's golden curls like a mockery of sanctity. Valenne pressed her knuckles against her mouth. Then she saw him. Rian. He stood beside Mireia. No regalia today, only a dark tunic lined in deep cobalt, the color he wore on the night of war councils or intimate dinners. Valenne's vision blurred, and she blinked hard to clear it, but what she saw next was unmistakable. Rian leaned in. Mireia tilted her head. And with the smallest smile, soft, practiced, and tender, he lifted her cloak and fastened it at her shoulder. The same gesture he had done for Valenne countless times before. On stormy days. In moonlit gardens. In the stillness between meetings when no one watched but the wind. Now, he did it for another. The movement was practiced. Natural. Familiar. He didn't flinch when their hands touched. He didn't glance over his shoulder. He didn't falter. He did not look for her. Not once. Something cracked inside her, not loud, not shattering. Just a slow splintering, like frost crawling across glass. She stepped back from the window, hands slack at her sides. Her body felt too large, too hollow. The walls pressed closer. The silence deepened. She remembered, suddenly, the first time Rian had called her by name, not Valenne, not my lady, but Valenne, voice dipped low and meant only for her. She remembered his fingertips on her wrist. The ache in her chest when he'd said, "You already are my Luna." And now? Now he smiled at someone else with her title on their shoulders. She turned slowly, walked to the edge of the narrow bed, and sat. There were no tears. Only the strange stillness of watching your name slip through someone else's lips. He loved the crown. Not the girl who wore it. And she had loved a ghost in a prince's shape. Chapter 4, I am the stain. They stripped her name before they touched her skin. Valenne stood at the edge of the council steps, wrists bound in ceremonial iron, not shackles of punishment, but of ritual containment. As if silver links and ancient scripts carved into metal could purify what they believed was impure. Above her, the judgment platform rose in stark white stone, polished so clean it gleamed beneath the twin moons. The crowd spread below and beyond it like a sea of salt and ash. Wolves of all bloodlines, nobles in gold-trimmed cloaks, merchants in steel-threaded tunics, lowborns with leather cords around their throats, had gathered to watch. They had come for her unmaking. From the shadows of the high balcony, Mireia stood clothed in white, Valenne's white, her golden curls veiled in a cascade of gossamer and frost glass. The Luna crest, the one that had once burned Valenne's chest with its promise, now shimmered at the hollow of Mireia's throat. Next to her stood Rian. Cloaked in the royal blue of judgment. Expression unreadable. Valenne did not look away. Even as the guards pushed her to kneel. The bloodline severance ritual was rarely performed. A last resort. A public rebuke. It was not death, not in body, but worse, the denial of place, of worth, of name. Once done, no bond would recognize her. No right would welcome her. No wolf would acknowledge her as kin. She would become a living ghost. The crowd whispered her name. And then whispered it again, as if the syllables were scandal and sin. Is that her? The false Luna? She wore the crest and smiled. I saw it. A servant's child, they say. Dirt and silk. Valenne kept her chin lifted. Her mouth tasted of iron and wind. The ceremonial gown they'd shoved over her shoulders was thin, sleeveless, and colorless. Her knees burned against the stone. She could smell the old scorch marks beneath her, remnants of others who had knelt here before. They tied her hair back in a single silver rope, exposing her bare back. At the signal of a bell, Valenne approached. He carried the severing brand, a flat, triangular piece of black steel etched with the glyph of false blood. Heated in the flame of Luna Cruenta, it would not burn red. It would burn dark. Like ash. Valenne knelt beside her, smiling. The scar across his chin twitched. "You won't pass out too soon, will you?" he murmured in her ear. "I like it when they stay awake." Valenne did not answer. She did not beg. She stared upward, not at the sky, but at him. Rian. His eyes met hers. And did nothing. The brand met her skin. She did not scream. But her body jerked, once, like something punched from the inside. Her breath caught and scattered. The pain was not the sharp flash of flame. It was slower. More brutal. A searing unraveling. A statement carved in flesh. She could smell herself burning. She could hear the sizzle. But most of all, she could feel him watching. When it was done, her back smoked in the cold air. A faint hiss as the iron lifted, leaving behind a deep, puckered glyph just beneath her right shoulder blade. The mark of a liar. The brand of the fallen. It would never fade. The crowd erupted in roars, not cheers, but stones. One struck her shoulder. Another grazed her cheek. A third slammed into her ribs with a crunch that took the air from her lungs. She bent forward. Not in defeat, in instinct. In pain. In survival. And still, he did nothing. Mireia stood above, motionless. Regal. Her lips parted ever so slightly in something that might have been delight. Or maybe it was only hunger, the kind that was never about food. Valenne's knee slipped in her own blood. That was when she spoke. Not to the crowd. Not to the heavens. To him. Her voice rasped out, raw and wrecked. "You called me Luna." Another stone. Another cut across her temple. Still, she raised her face, gaze shining not with tears, but disbelief. "You called me Luna. You said it, with your mouth on my skin." No answer. She took a breath. The words trembled. "And now you stand there, and you won't even look at me. Won't even say my name." A long silence. And then he descended one step. One step closer. The crowd fell quiet, waiting. Hoping for spectacle. Expecting mercy or judgment. Something. He didn't lift her. He didn't shield her. He only said, cold and low, "Yesterday, your name still meant something." And then he turned away. As if that were all. As if she had never existed. Valenne watched the shape of his back retreat, each step a blade sliding through her chest. Her mouth opened. Closed. There were no more words left. Only blood. And silence. And ash in her lungs. She was no longer Valenne Cyralis. She was the stain he washed off his throne. Chapter 5, Beneath What He Loved. It was warm in the dream. Warm in a way the palace had never been. The kind of warmth that bloomed from a body pressed close, arms curling around hers like protection, like promise. She could feel the silk of his breath against her neck, the whisper of a kiss just beneath her ear. "You found me," she said, voice soft and startled, as if it might break the dream apart. "I never left," came his reply, low and velvet smooth. Rian. His name tasted sweeter here. She turned to look at him and found his face washed in golden light, 1,000 candles flickering behind him on the high altar, where the Luna bond was once sealed with kiss and blood and wolf song. His eyes were full of knowing. His hands rested on her hips. He pulled her into him, mouth brushing hers in a kiss that wasn't desperate, but claiming. Steady. Worshipful. The kind of kiss that said, "I see you. I choose you. I remember." Her fingers fisted in the fabric of his collar. She clung. "I knew it wasn't real," she whispered, against his lips. "You couldn't watch them hurt me. You couldn't stand by." You'd come back. He kissed her again. Softer this time. But when she blinked, the altar behind him was gone. The candlelight had turned red. Red like flame. Red like blood. Red like... She gasped. His hands were gone. He was gone. And the floor beneath her had turned to filth. Valenne woke with her face pressed to stone. No, worse. It wasn't stone. The floor was wet. Slimy. Her fingers splayed in something too thick for water and too dark to name. She tried to lift herself and couldn't. Her muscles refused. Her ribs ached with every breath. Her back, gods, her back felt split open. She rolled halfway onto her side, and the motion sent a fresh sting through her spine. The pain yanked her fully back. The brand. The ceremony. The crowd. Rian. A raw noise slipped from her throat, not quite a sob, not quite a breath. Her vision was dark around the edges, but she could make out the shape of rusted bars in the low light and smell the rot of mildew and urine and something older and wrong. The Starhold dungeons. The lowest level. The place where titles came to die. She lay in a puddle of waste and bile, her once white shift now brown and red. Her knees were scraped raw. Her lips split. And somewhere above her head, water dripped, steady as a heartbeat. She closed her eyes again, and this time, the dream did not return. Only memory did. Her mother's hands had always smelled of salt and lavender. Your name is a blessing, she had said once, brushing Valenne's hair with slow, careful strokes. Don't ever let them steal it. Valenne had been young then, younger than she felt now, even on this floor. She remembered how she used to trace the letters of her name in the fogged-up glass of the upper palace mirrors, smiling as if seeing it written somehow made it more real. But names could be burned away. And smiles could be worn by others. Mireia wore hers now. And Rian. He had taken it back. The name he'd spoken like a vow. The name he had once groaned in her ear with fingers tangled in her hair. That name now sat in his throat like poison. He would not say it. So she would. Even if no one else heard. Even if she was the last. With trembling hands, she dragged her nails across the filthy wall beside her. The surface was rough, layers of grime caked over cracked stone, but she scratched anyway, shallow, scraping lines. V. A. L. E. N. N. E. Her fingers left smears of blood in their wake. Her vision swam. But the letters were there. Rough. Ugly. Real. She stared at them, slumped sideways, her breath hitching. Then she smiled. Not the smile they had taken from her. Not the one she had worn at court, under pearls and prophecy. A cracked smile. A mad one. The kind that came when you realized your name still lived, not in scrolls, not in bloodlines, not on their tongues. But in your hand. Her lips moved, forming the shape of it. Valenne. Then again, quieter. For me. A tear slipped down her temple and was swallowed by the grime beneath her. She did not ask to be saved. She did not imagine rescue. But as the darkness crept over her vision again, she thought of the altar. Of the dream. Of arms pulling her close, even if they were false. And she wondered. Would the next time be dream? Or memory? Or death? She didn't care anymore. Because now, at least, she had the wall. And it knew her name. Chapter 6, The Collar for a Liar. There were no stars in the Moonheart chamber, only firelight. Valenne was dragged in by her elbows, her heels scraping the rune-carved floor, silver strands of hair matted to her cheeks like spider silk. Her shift clung to her skin, soaked in dried blood and the damp rot of the lower cells. She could barely lift her head. But she heard them. The council. The crowd. The judgment. They stood in circles, tiered balconies of watching wolves, elders, and nobles cloaked in ceremonial frost silk, murmuring in self-righteous approval. They stared down into the stone hollow like spectators at a pit sacrifice. She was the offering. At the center of the dais stood the forge pillar, glowing with low white flame. Suspended above it, gleaming like a death sentence, was the collar. Silver banded. Rune inscribed. Forged by hand. The identity lock. Once sealed, it would suppress a wolf's instincts. Her transformation. Her strength. Her soul. It was used only on the most dangerous criminals. And now, her. For silver flame enforcers seized her limbs, dragging her upright. Her knees buckled. She choked back a cry as her burned back pressed against the floor. Hands gripped her wrists. Her thighs. Her throat. They didn't speak to her. They didn't need to. Because the one who would speak was already walking forward. Rian. He descended the ceremonial steps with the same precision he once used in battle. Or in bed. His coat was midnight black, embroidered with the royal crest in silver thread. Not a hair out of place. His boots clicked against the stone with steady, heartless rhythm. He stopped beside the forge. And reached up. The collar gleamed as he plucked it from the flame. Smoke curled from the metal. The runes glowed. It was hot enough to sear flesh. He approached her slowly, and the crowd leaned forward, breathless. Valenne lifted her head with what strength she had left. Her throat was red and bruised. Her mouth was already open, not in defiance. In disbelief. He crouched beside her. Their eyes met. Hers were wide, rimmed with broken capillaries and desperation. His were empty. And then he smiled. Just a little. Just enough. Like a man who knew exactly what he was about to do. You always needed something to remind you who you are, he murmured, so only she could hear. Now everyone will see it, too. Her fingers twitched. No, she rasped. Please, Rian, don't. He didn't flinch. He pressed the collar against her throat. The hiss of burning flesh echoed like a scream. She did scream then. Her whole body arched. The guards had to tighten their hold to keep her from thrashing free. Smoke burst from her skin. The silver fused to her collarbone like molten armor. It felt like her soul was being carved out. Stop, please stop, she gasped between sobs, burning. Still, he held it there. Until the last rune sealed. Until the last glow dimmed. Until she collapsed, shaking, tears streaking through soot and blood. He rose without urgency. Looked down at her. And said, voice low and cold and final. A dog like you should wear a collar. Don't ever think of calling yourself Luna again. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. Even the flames seemed to bow in it. She didn't cry his name. She couldn't. Her mouth opened. No sound came. She didn't move, except for her fingers, twitching, grasping, clawing at the floor like they might find the girl who had once stood on these stones with a crown waiting at her feet. She found nothing. Only blood. Only ash. Only the collar tightening as if it breathed. She had been named. And that name was Liar. Chapter 7, Fed like a beast. She had lost count of the days. There were no windows in the Lunark pit. No light save for the occasional flicker of a torch passed above the grate far overhead. No sun. No moon. Just cold stone slick with condensation and the distant echo of chains that weren't hers. Time here moved like breath through water, heavy, distorted, impossible to track. Valenne curled beneath the rotted curve of a pipe in the farthest corner, knees drawn to her chest, fingers crusted in dried blood and filth. The collar at her throat seared whenever her thoughts wandered too far, as if it could punish rebellion without movement. Her stomach had long since collapsed into itself, protesting with stabbing aches and low growls like a dying beast. But hunger was no longer the worst part. The worst part was the bucket. Every evening, or what she assumed to be evening, it dropped from a rusted pulley at the edge of the pit, clanging against the stone with metallic finality. Its contents, a bowl of lukewarm stew, barely soup, often gray, sometimes yellow. Always the same sour stench of rotted greens and bone scraps. And laced, unmistakably, with soul silt. The suppressant. She tasted it every time. The way it slid under her tongue, clung to her teeth. It blurred her senses, dimmed the noise inside her mind until even her wolf's voice became a faded hum, too soft to hold. At first, she refused it. She'd kicked the bowl across the cell the first night, watched it spill like bile across the floor. The second day, she had thrown the bucket itself at the wall. By the third day, she had lost the strength to lift it. But she still didn't eat. Until they came. They didn't speak when they opened the grate. 3 palace guards in silver-trimmed armor, faces shadowed beneath helms. One held a torch. One held a cloth pouch. The last carried a wolf jaw clamp, a device used for feeding savage cubs or sedating ferals. Valenne knew the look in their eyes. She crawled backwards, spine pressed to the wall. No. They moved like it was routine. As if force-feeding a former Luna was just another task on the day's docket. The second guard seized her shoulders. The third knelt beside her with the clamp. I said no, don't touch. The cold metal forced her jaw open with a wrenching crack. Her neck twisted. She tried to scream, but one hand clamped her throat, another smothered her mouth. Then came the powder, bitter and dry, shoveled into the back of her throat, followed by a splash of brine water to wash it down. She choked. Gagged. Vomited halfway. It didn't matter. They held her down and waited until her muscles went limp, her eyelids half-masted, her body soaked in sweat and shame. A final blow, sharp and deliberate, struck her stomach. She folded in on herself, gasping, and the guards left without a word. The torchlight receded. The door shut. Silence returned. And she was alone. She didn't remember passing out. But when she awoke, she was shaking. Every bone burned. Her skin felt too tight, her breath shallow and fast. She was drenched in cold sweat, every muscle quivering with the aftershock of fever. The collar pulsed once, faintly, like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. She blinked, slowly. The bucket still sat at the center of the room. New stew. New powder. The stink turned her stomach, but her body screamed louder. She stared at the bowl for a long time. Then crawled. Not like a queen. Not like a Luna. Like a dog. She drank. Every mouthful coated her throat like rot. Her tears dripped into the broth. She didn't stop. She drank until it was empty. Until her hands stopped shaking. Until she hated herself. And then she crawled back to her corner. She curled into the filth, shivering, eyes wide open in the dark. And whispered, to no one. I'd rather die than let them win. But the next night, she drank again. Because hunger made liars of queens. Because pain wasn't the worst part. Because living was still the only way she could prove she had ever worn that crown. Chapter 8, Kneel or Be Broken. The sky was mercilessly bright. It blazed overhead in pale, blinding blue as if mocking her for having once prayed to the moon. Valenne's eyes watered under the sudden light as she was yanked into the open square. Her body, weakened from fever and soul silt, crumpled at the knees as soon as her bare feet touched sun-warmed stone. The Judgment Plaza had been polished for spectacle. White marble lined with carved wolf insignias stretched out like a stage, surrounded on all sides by elevated balconies thick with courtiers, nobles, and the ravenous public. The city had come to see its ghost. And they saw her. Valenne. Hair tangled and matted down her back. Collar still fused to her throat, swollen and blistered. Eyes sunken, skin bruised, ribs visible through a threadbare shift now too large for her shrunken frame. But it was still her. The girl who had once been Luna. The soldiers shoved her forward with iron-tipped boots. She stumbled and caught herself, hands scraping raw against the stone. She didn't lift her head. Not yet. She didn't want to see them. Not him. She couldn't. Raise her, came a voice, cold and perfumed with power. Mireia. They seized Valenne's arms, dragged her upright and held her fast at the center of the square. Her eyes fluttered open. Mireia stood in her place, on the crescent dais, where Luna once ruled, draped in silver and indigo, the crest shining at her breast. She looked radiant. Reigning. Ravishing. Her golden hair coiled in a queen's braid, her lips parted in a benevolent smile. She was the dream repainted by a liar's hand. Valenne wanted to spit. To scream. But all she could do was breathe, shallow, fragile breaths through a throat still burning from the last time she dared speak her truth. Then came him. Rian. Descending the council steps with his usual precision. His cloak billowed behind him like the banners of conquest. He did not look at her. Not once. His gaze swept across the crowd, then upward toward Mireia. He nodded. The signal. A guard stepped forward. The accused, the man called, voice sharp, will kneel before her grace, Lady Mireia Thornell, true Luna of the Silver Flame Court, and deliver the blood remorse oath, acknowledging her false claim and renouncing her titles. Valenne's blood turned to ice. She did not move. Another guard approached. Kneel. Still, she didn't. Rian finally turned to look at her. And something in his eyes tightened, not regret. Not recognition. Only the spark of inconvenience. Do it, Mireia called gently, hands folded like a saint. Let the people see you've accepted your place. Valenne looked up at her, and smiled. It was small. Tired. Empty. But it was a no. The square froze. Rian stepped forward. Kneel, he said, voice low. She didn't flinch. No. That single word shattered the air. He didn't hesitate. He nodded once. A guard grabbed her by the hair. Valenne screamed as her scalp tore under the force. Her knees were kicked from behind. Her body hit the ground, hard, and her face slammed into the marble with a sickening crack. Blood bloomed beneath her mouth. The plaza gasped. She didn't cry out again. Didn't move. A smear of crimson painted the floor beneath her cheek. She lay still. Breathing. Shaking. Broken. Rian crouched beside her. His lips brushed her ear, and what he said next carved into her deeper than the collar ever had. Nobility won't feed you, Valenne. You should be grateful I let you bow at all. You're nothing now. Not even a servant. Just something to show mercy to. Her teeth clenched so hard her jaw screamed. He leaned closer. You belong to a crown. I wanted the crown. Not the stain wearing it. And with that, he stood. The crowd erupted. Cheers. Applause. Relief. Justice, they called it. Valenne didn't rise. Didn't lift her head. She simply stared at the blood seeping into the cracks in the stone. Watched it trail like a river, hers, and no one else's. and whispered, lips barely moving. It wasn't that he didn't want me. It was that I was never worth wanting. Chapter 9, The Stripped Beast. The walls of the woven bone chamber bled steam. Moss crept down from cracks in the ceiling, and the stink of iron, mildew, and wet stone clung to every breath. Somewhere beneath the silver flame palace, below the prisons, beneath even the lunar pits, the floor wept condensation and bone ash. This was where names were ground into silence. And this was where they brought her. Valenne. Not by name. Not by chain. They dragged her like something already dead. 2 guards gripped her arms, another her ankles. A 4th walked ahead, whistling. The passage echoed with every bootstep, every jolt of her limp body scraping against stone. She no longer resisted. Her limbs hung loose, her eyes half-lidded, skin cold. They had broken her body. But she hadn't cried yet. They meant to change that. The chamber door groaned open. She was dropped like a sack of rags onto the central slab, a long, low table of obsidian bolted into the floor. Her temple struck the edge. Blood trickled into her hair. Rise and shine, Luna, one soldier mocked, chuckling as he secured her wrists above her head. Or whatever you call yourself now. They stripped her robe first. It was already torn. Stiff with sweat and old blood. It peeled from her skin like a second husk. Her scars caught the dim torchlight, the sealed collar, the faded sigil burned across her back, the fresh purple-yellow from kneeling too long. Look at this, another said, circling. You'd think a bitch that wore silver could at least hold her chin up. Can't even sit up right now. Doesn't need a crown anymore, the third added. We'll take that, too. And then they reached for her hair. The silver strands. The moonlit veil that had once shimmered behind her like prophecy itself. They bound it with rough twine, pulling it tight until her scalp screamed. And then, without ceremony. SHRRK. The first cut. A blade, rusted and blunt, hacked through the braid in 2 jagged sawing motions. The hair fell to the floor in a limp silver heap. One soldier picked it up, twirled it like rope between his fingers. Should we gift it to her replacement? He sneered. Let her wear the pelt of the beast she beat. They laughed. Valenne said nothing. Only her fingertips curled tight against the stone, nails biting into ancient grooves where others had gripped, others had broken. They weren't finished. One fetched a basin, dark water sloshing. The second uncoiled a whip from the wall. By decree of her grace, he intoned mockingly, this one is to receive 12 lashes. For falsifying nobility. For polluting the sacred rites. For walking in the Luna's shadow unearned. He smiled. For daring to wear the crown with a servant's soul. The first strike came without warning. It landed across her back with a crack like thunder. Her entire body arched off the slab, muscles seizing, breath bursting from her in a silent scream. Blood sprayed. The skin split. Second lash, lower, crueler. Third, across the old brand. Fourth, high and diagonal. Her throat caught fire, but she didn't scream. She bit down instead. Hard. Her teeth pierced her tongue. The metallic tang flooded her mouth. She gagged, choked, swallowed it down. The 5th lash landed just below her shoulder blade. Then the 6th. She was trembling now. Her hands fisted against the slab so tightly her fingers turned white. 7th. 8th. 9th. Each one slower. Deeper. The guards were grinning, sweat beading on their brows from the effort of breaking her. Not just her body, but her silence. She thinks she's still royal, one spat. Still thinks someone will come. Then let's carve it out of her. 10th. 11th. The final lash came with ceremony. The whip was raised high. Held there. The air trembled with anticipation. And then, the 12th lash fell across every previous wound, slicing open skin already raw, already ruined. Her body went limp. But still, no scream. Only the whisper of blood hitting the floor. Only the slow shudder of breath that refused to die. The guard stood back. Waiting. Expecting her to beg. To cry. To curse. Valenne didn't move. Didn't speak. Her head was turned to the side, cheek pressed to the slab. Her mouth parted. And a single drop of blood slipped from her lip and traced the groove of a half-faded rune carved into the stone, a mark from long ago. She stared at it. Eyes glassy. Unseeing. She didn't even blink. And in the silence that followed, one of the guards muttered, uneasy now, she didn't even cry. Let her rot, another said. She ain't worth the rope it'd take to hang her. They left her like that. Naked. Bleeding. Bald. Branded. But still. Breathing. Chapter 10, The One They Forgot to Kill. They came for her at dawn. Not the kind of dawn with light. No. The dawn of rot and silence. The one that passed without color in the underhalls, where no sun dared shine. 2 men in gray aprons entered the punishment wing, silent as meat handlers. Their gloves were stained with ash and soot, not blood. They didn't wear the sigil of any noble house, only the twisted mark of the cleansing guild, the ones who removed what the crown no longer wished to see. She didn't flinch when they touched her. Didn't move when they rolled her body onto the stretcher made of splintered wood and frayed rope. Her lips were pale, blue at the edges. Her wrists hung limply over the sides. Dead? The younger one asked, glancing toward the whip-slashed back. Breath's gone. Look at her throat. No pulse. She's bloated from fever. You want to check her yourself? A pause. Then, no. She's past the burning window anyway. Bones'll snap quick. They didn't bind her. Didn't cover her face. They didn't even bother to say her name. Because she no longer had one. She was tagged with chalk at the ankle, unclaimed. Null. Disgraced. The body once called Valenne was wheeled down through the ash galleries, through the winding chambers beneath the royal incineration vault, toward the smoke gate, where all condemned things went to die. Her fingers twitched once. No one saw. Wind. It howled like warning. As they neared the lift that would carry her to the bone furnace, a gust shot up from the depths of the shaft, dry and violent. It caught the edge of the stretcher, rocked it sideways. One wheel hit the uneven stone. The men cursed. And she fell. The body tumbled down into the shaft, not far, not deep, just enough to miss the clean line to the flames. Just enough to hit the second grate below. The Lost Pit. Also called the Silent Hollow. A place not mapped. Not monitored. A place where bones went when they slipped between record and ritual. She landed with a dull thud against cold stone. Her breath shuddered back into her lungs. Then again. Faint. Gasping. Alive. Valenne woke to nothing. No warmth. No color. No sound. Only the smell of char and bone. The floor was powder, not dust, but ash, soft, weightless, and suffocating. Her face was pressed against it. She inhaled and coughed, and the movement racked her broken ribs. She didn't scream. She didn't even try to move. Because there was no one to hear her. No one coming. She had fallen through the world and landed where the forgotten went. Somewhere far above, she could still hear the faint hum of bells, soft, elegant. The coronation bells. And through the cracks in her memory, the sound wove into vision. A girl draped in silver. A man's hand placing a crown chain across her neck. A promise whispered to the wrong lips. This is the glory you were meant for. Her lips parted. But the name she meant to say never came. Instead, a broken laugh rasped up from her chest. Quiet. Bitter. Almost joyful. Because the truth had never been more clear. They didn't bury her. They didn't kill her. They didn't even care enough to finish her. She lay still. Swallowed the silence. And whispered, voice ragged. You didn't even think I was worth the death. And somewhere, beneath ash, beneath ruin, beneath every crown she'd ever bled for, something inside her began to burn. Chapter 11, The Crown That Replaced Me. The bells tolled. Not the hollow clangs of death, nor the quiet toll of mourning, but the glorious 12-fold peal that rang for coronation. The sound echoed from tower to terrace, sweeping down the slopes of Lumarich, across glass windows and stone courtyards, through the gorge of the ancient cliffs like a hymn too bright to ignore. The wolves of the realm turned their faces upward and watched another Luna rise. The coronation hall was drenched in white fire. Candles lined every archway and stairwell, thousands of them, reflecting off polished obsidian tiles. Moonstone banners hung from the vaulted ceiling, embroidered with the crest of the silver flame court, the twin wolves circling the Luna crown. All eyes were on the staircase. The Mooncrest steps, carved from the bones of the first royal hunt. A single figure ascended them. Mireia. Gowned in a silver-white robe too intricate to have been tailored for her. Because it hadn't been. It was made for someone else. It was Valenne's. Her name was no longer spoken, but it clung to every thread, every sapphire bead. The silk still shimmered like winter light, catching on the air like a whisper lost in time. And now it graced Mireia's form, hips narrower, posture sweeter, smile sharper. She carried herself like a queen. That much was true. But the fabric rebelled. The gown sagged in places it had once hugged tightly. The weight of the Luna chain did not sit as softly against her collarbone. Still, no one dared to say it. Because Rian stood waiting at the top. Dressed in ceremonial black, his silver insignia freshly polished. His hair was cropped, immaculate. His jaw set. When Mireia reached him, he extended his hand. She gave it to him, dainty, poised. And he fastened the crown chain around her throat. A thin band of silver and carved lunar opal, shaped like a crescent embracing her skin. It glowed under the torchlight. Ancient. Undeniable. The Luna crest. Once destined for someone else. Now bestowed upon her like truth rewritten. Rian leaned in, voice so soft the audience strained to hear. This is what you were meant for, Mireia. This is yours. The crowd erupted. The high elders rose. Council banners unfurled. Musicians began their descent from the balconies above, playing the Moonfire Waltz, sacred and chilling. The hall became a furnace of celebration. And Rian offered Mireia his hand again, this time not for ascension, but for a dance. She stepped into his arms. They began to move, a perfect spiral of grace and solemnity. Their steps timed to tradition, their bodies in perfect echo. Rian's hand rested on her waist. Her cheek brushed his jaw. Her smile widened, her lashes fluttered. Cameras flashed. Petals fell from above, scented with royal garden roses. The crowd chanted. A new moon rises. The silver flame endures. Long live Luna Mireia. Far below. The ashes stirred. Deep beneath the palace, in the hollow no one mapped, a figure lay in silence. Not buried. Not burned. Just discarded. Valenne's body hadn't moved for hours. Her skin was pale, marked with soot and bruises, blood crusted at her scalp where hair had once flowed like silver silk. She might have looked dead. Might have been dead. But her chest still lifted. Barely. Her lips, cracked and blackened, parted just enough for breath to enter. Her limbs didn't twitch. Her heartbeat, faint. Starved. Forgotten. In the darkness, she saw light. Not from above. But from memory. She saw him again, Rian, when he'd first said her name like prayer, when he called her Luna beneath the stars. She'd believed him. Loved him. Lived for the way his eyes softened just before a kiss. She saw Mireille's smile. Wearing it. Wearing her. And then she heard the bells. Above. Beyond. Impossible to reach. But she heard them all the same. Her fingers curled slightly in the ash. Just slightly. Not enough to rise. Not yet. But enough to remember. And in the stillness that followed, her thoughts curled like smoke around the memory that hurt the most. I used to think he loved me. But he didn't want me. He just wanted someone who looked like his Luna. Chapter 12, The One Who Tore the Gates. The moon bled. A red ring around its center, Luna Cruenta in full eclipse. And still, the coronation bell sang. From the western cliffs to the teeth of the high walls, the silver flame palace stood like a blade between heaven and earth, proud and cold, unaware. Unprepared. Because thunder was coming. The first sound was hooves. Then steel. Then wind that moved like a beast with its throat torn open. From the north gates of Lomarich, beneath veils of smoke and dusk fog, the Ashfang rider surged forward, a silver phalanx cutting through the mist. No warning. No herald. Only banners of ash gray and crimson slashing behind them, no royal insignia, only the twin wolves in a circle of flame. Their armor was northern forged, faceted and dark. Their eyes glowed with soul fire. At the front, astride a storm-gray destrier. Torin Veyer. Dark hair braided down his back, bloodthirst glowing in his silver-ringed eyes. Silent. Deadly. Unstoppable. They hit the gates like a second eclipse. Bolts snapped. Chains screamed. The outer ward guards barely sounded the alarm before the first rider crashed through the checkpoint and sent a pair of silver-cloaked enforcers flying. Torin didn't stop. He didn't even look at the chaos around him. Because he wasn't there for war. He was there for her. The inner courtyard shattered beneath steel. Screams echoed from the old barracks. Flaming arrows hissed through the sky. But Torin had already dismounted. He tossed his war axe to a younger wolf, unsheathed a single moon-forged blade, and stalked toward the eastern colonnade, the oldest part of the palace, untouched by light, seldom used except for one purpose. Disposal. Clear the halls, he growled. Seal behind me. One soldier hesitated. The runes are bound, my lord. We were told. Torin slammed a hand against the boy's chest. Do I look like I asked twice? The corridor opened with a shriek of rusted hinges. The ancient passageways beneath the furnace stones groaned as Torin stepped inside, his boots slicing through pools of old soot, ash stirring in every breath. He followed the scent. Of blood. Of rot. Of silver gone to waste. And finally, he reached the gate. A door of black steel, sealed with old magic. Unmarked. It took 3 strokes of his sword and a scream of raw lunar force to break it open. And when it did, he dropped the blade. The silent pit reeked of forgotten things. Char and old wolf bone. Ash piled knee-deep. The air here did not move. Even the torches on the wall refused to burn straight. In the center, half submerged in soot, lay the ghost of a girl. Naked. Burned. Bruised. A collar of scorched silver locked tight around her throat. Her ribs jutted like blades. Her wrists were raw. Her skin bore every kiss of cruelty a court could offer. But her hair, even in ruin, it gleamed faintly with silver. He knew her in an instant. Valenne. No voice answered. Her lips were cracked. Her limbs unmoving. His steps quickened. He dropped to his knees. When he touched her, she was cold. Not frozen. Not yet. Please, he breathed, lowering his forehead to hers, his hand sliding under her skull. Please, don't do this. Still nothing. His fingers hovered over her throat, pressed gently. No pulse. Then faint. So faint, it could have been memory. But it was enough. He gathered her into his arms. She weighed nothing. Nothing. Her head lolled against his chest like she had no bones left inside her. Her collar bit into his palm as he held her tighter. He didn't care. He looked up into the dark. And his voice thundered. Who dares call her a cur? Who dares seal a Luna in silence? The stone trembled. The iron doors groaned behind him. Lightning ripped across the sky outside the ruins. And the court above, in the midst of dance and coronation and hollow joy, felt the tremor. Mireia paused mid-spin. Rian turned his head. Elders whispered. What was that? The palace didn't answer. But the pit did. Torin rose, carrying Valenne in both arms, stood clinging to his shoulders, his boots marked with blood and ash. His braid swung behind him, wild and damp from sweat and rage. He didn't whisper farewell. He didn't bother with stealth. He simply turned his back on the prison of silence and walked straight through the halls they'd buried her in. He passed through fire. Through screams. Through steel and dust and command. Until the wolves who followed him knew only one truth. The lost Luna had not died. She had been claimed by the one Alpha who remembered her name. And that was all it would take to break the kingdom. Chapter 13, The Body That Refused to Heal. There were no windows in the Starvale shelter. Only a ceiling of glimmering quartz and threads of rune-lit smoke that curled like frost flowers above the bed. Silence hung heavy in the room. The kind of silence that meant breath was still present but only just. Valenne lay beneath a wool-lined sheet, her body wrapped in layers of cooling paste and sacred linen, soaked through with lunar resin and wolf-shade balm. Her skin bore the faintest shimmer, as though frost had settled in her pores. Her mouth twitched. A gasp that didn't reach sound. A flutter that didn't become life. And still, Torin watched her. He hadn't moved in hours. Not even to breathe deeply. He sat at the edge of her cot, forearms on his knees, a shallow scrape across his jaw from where a rune shard had nicked him during the gate breach. His eyes, though steady, star-born eyes, were fixed on the hollow of her throat. On the collar mark. The ring of scorched silver still left a blistered shadow, its seal designed to lock the wolf's soul inside and render the bearer lesser. Wrong. She breathes, whispered the healer behind him. But only in the shallowest sense. Her ribs are broken. Her vocal cords fused. There's, she hesitated, severe damage to the lunar nerve. Torin didn't answer. He dipped a cloth into a basin beside him and gently wiped at the corner of Valenne's mouth, where a dark clot had broken, and wept anew. She speaks when she sleeps, the healer added, softer now. But only one name. A pause. Rian. Torin's jaw tightened. But he didn't speak of it. Not now. Not while Valenne looked like death's breath frozen over. Not while her pulse faltered like the rhythm of a dying drum, too proud to beg for more time. Instead, he leaned forward until his lips nearly brushed her temple and whispered, "You don't have to be anyone's Luna. Not now. Not ever again." His voice cracked. "But you do have to live." The next time she stirred, it was night again. Or something like night. The skies above the Ashfong hold were permanently inked with haze, starlight smeared by volcanic ash, and the moons veiled in sullen red glow. Valenne gasped awake. Not all at once. Not violently. But like a soul surfacing after centuries beneath cold water. Her throat scraped against itself. Her lungs refused to obey. She arched slightly, fingers clawing against the bedroll, skin flaking from her knuckles as her dry lips parted. And the first sound she gave was not a name. It was a whimper. So raw. So small. So human. Torin was already beside her. He caught her wrist as she shook. You're safe. You're an Ashfong. No one will hurt you here. Her head turned slowly, like her neck remembered too much pain to move freely. Her eyes blinked open, slits of silvered gray, dulled by fever and lack of hope. And then she spoke. Barely. Just breath. No voice. I have to go back. Torin stilled. She blinked again, tears already sliding from the corners of her eyes. I didn't kneel. They said, if I didn't kneel. Her voice broke. She gagged on the end of the sentence, as if even that thought choked her harder than any silver collar. Torin's fingers curled into the furs beside her shoulder. You're not going back, he said softly. But they'll kill me, she whispered. No. I should have knelt, she murmured. No, Valenne. His voice dropped lower. You should have never had to. She sobbed. But it was a soundless thing. A tremble in the lips. A fracture in the chest. Her tears soaked the linens. And Torin leaned in then, forehead pressing gently to hers, just as he had when he found her in the pit. Not to kiss. Not to claim. But to hold something sacred that was still breaking. He breathed in her shattered scent, smoke, pain, the last traces of court perfume clinging like ghosts, and exhaled his own fury. They burned you because they knew you were real. He said it against her skin. As if willing her to believe it, even when she didn't. Even when she couldn't. She fell asleep like that. With the only man who hadn't asked her to wear a crown. Only to survive. Later that night, when the healer returned to change the bandages on her chest, she froze at the threshold. Because Torin hadn't moved. He still sat beside the bed, one hand gently curled around Valenne's, his expression unreadable but not empty. The healer blinked. You said she was strong, she murmured. I was wrong, Torin said quietly. She's not strong? His voice dropped. She's still alive. After everything. That's not strength. That's something fiercer. He didn't finish the sentence. He only turned his head, silver eyes flickering like coals behind a mask of restraint. It's vengeance waiting to be born. Chapter 14, The Fire in Her Throat. The room reeked of silver ash and old blood. It was called the Bone Needle Room not for poetic flourish, but for what lay inside, stone racks carved with ancient glyphs, jars of burned marrow, twisted iron tools coiled like sleeping snakes, and at the farthest wall, a basin carved from the hollowed skull of a giant wolf. And in its center, Valenne lay bound, her body trembling on the ceremonial slab, half naked, bruised, and already damp with sweat though the air around her burned cold. Her throat was exposed, head tilted back over the ruined headrest, her lips parted in unconscious shivering. Torin stood beside her. His hands clenched into fists. She's not ready, he said. His voice was low, cold. She's dying, the silver flame remaker said, dipping a long, hooked needle into the vial of bone fire liquid. That makes her as ready as she'll ever be. The fluid glowed with a sickly golden red hue. It pulsed inside the glass as if breathing. Her lunar nerve is charred, added the Ashfong healer, an older woman with burned fingers and kind eyes. If we wait, her ability to ever speak again might vanish entirely. Or worse, her soul might split beyond return. Torrhen's jaw ticked. Still, he said nothing. He watched as the remaker set the needle to flame. And then they began. It was not a scream. Not at first. It was the sound of a wolf's breath catching mid-snarl. A broken gasp, then a strangled cry. Then came the scream. Raw. Cracked. Unholy. Valenne arched against the bindings, silver hair stuck to her sweat-drenched cheeks as the first drop of bone fire entered her vocal cords. She convulsed. No, no, please, don't burn me again. The words burst from her in a frantic shriek. But she wasn't here. Not really. She wasn't an ashfang, in this scorched den of healing. She was back in the silver flame dungeon, chained to the tribunal post, surrounded by jeering guards and Riant's quiet voice cutting through her skull. You deserve this. Cry, little Luna. Let the flames know your true name. I'll kneel, I swear I'll kneel, she screamed. Just stop. I already said it. I said I was wrong. The remaker paused, hand trembling slightly. Stop, Torrhen barked. You're killing her. She has to purge the seal, the healer insisted. The Silverlock scar is feeding her nightmares. She's not reliving it by memory, the collar is still echoing inside her. Valenne's body thrashed. She coughed black, something between bile and half-congealed blood, and then slumped as her energy failed. The next injection went in. And this time, she said nothing. She only whimpered like a pup in its final hour. 3 days passed. 3 full cycles beneath Luna Cruenta, and not once did she stir. Torrhen didn't leave the room. He barely blinked. He only changed her bandages, carefully, reverently wiping the blood that bubbled from her split lips, soaking the cloth in moonflower oil to ease the heat that still steamed from her collarbone. Her throat looked like it had been clawed by gods. It was mottled with scar tissue and runes half burned into her flesh. But beneath that, beneath the grime and healing pus and angry swelling, was the pale, glistening thread of new voice. A seed of restoration. A sliver of self. He watched it form, watched her breathe around it. Watched her live. And then on the third dawn, her eyes opened. Barely. He leaned forward, hand gripping hers. Valenne, he said, gently. She blinked. A long pause. Then. Who? He flinched. But smiled anyway. It's Torrhen, he whispered. You're safe. You're an ashfang. She stared at the ceiling, as if still not believing the world could exist beyond stone and chains. Is this, her voice cracked, barely more than the rustle of dead leaves, another trick? His heart shattered. No. She tried to lift a hand. Failed. Let it fall. Did I scream? Yes. I didn't mean to. I didn't. I'm sorry. He shook his head fiercely. Don't you dare apologize. I shouldn't have fought. I should have just let it take me. I always made things worse. Valenne. He told me, the more I screamed, the more they'd hurt me. Her eyes met his then. But I couldn't stop. A pause. And then, quieter. Even when I stopped caring if I lived. I couldn't stop screaming. Torrhen closed his eyes. For a moment, he couldn't speak. But when he did, it was soft. Not a promise. Not a vow. A truth. I'd spend the rest of my life proving you didn't deserve any of it. She blinked again. Tears, this time. But they didn't fall. They only welled and shimmered. And when he reached forward, cupping the side of her face, thumb brushing the place where the old collar ring had burned her most, she didn't flinch. Not this time. Not from him. That night, when he left the bone needle room, he passed the remaker in the corridor. "Is she stable?" the woman asked. Torrin nodded. "She'll speak again?" "Yes," he said. But not with the voice they tried to kill. He turned, eyes gleaming like silver fire beneath the ash-stained lantern light. "She'll speak with the one they forgot she still had." Chapter 15, The Girl Who Didn't Want to Wake. The wind in Ashfong was cruel. It dragged its knuckles through the canyons and scraped against the windows of the inner courtyard like a restless beast, snarling for entry. Within the shelter of Starshade Hollow, the warmth held fast, but it could not reach the corners of the room where Valenne lay curled beneath woven pelts, silent as stone. She had woken 5 days ago. And not spoken since. She ate nothing. Drank little. When the healers came to rewrap the scar along her throat, she turned her head toward the wall, eyes open but blank. Even Torrent's voice could not reach her. He tried, of course. He brought her sweet root tea. Steamed wolfbane bread. Once, even honeyed pineberries from the northern slopes rare enough to barter a blade for. She didn't touch any of it. She simply stared. Past him. Through him. As if she were still trapped beneath that mountain of ash, still waiting for the wolves to remember she was meant to die. "I found this," he said one morning, holding up a small copper mirror. The back was etched in runes, one of the few pieces recovered from the wreckage of a collapsed sanctuary. "It's old. But whole." She didn't respond. He stepped closer, kneeling beside her mattress. The hearth crackled behind him, casting both of their shadows against the stone. "You haven't seen your face since he paused, as if the word branded caught in his throat. "Since Silverflame." Still no answer. Torrin offered the mirror to her hand. She recoiled so hard she nearly fell off the bed. "No," she rasped, voice raw but functional now. "No, get that away. It's just a mirror, Valenne." "I said no." It was the first time she'd raised her voice since the fire. Her fingers trembled, clawed the sheets like a cornered wolf. Her breaths came fast, too fast, and her body curled in on itself. "I don't want to see it," she whispered. "I don't want to see her." Torrin set the mirror down. Slow. Gentle. A copper disc resting on a cushion of gilt. "Who?" he asked softly. She stared at the far wall. "The girl they destroyed and the girl who let them." Her nails dug deeper. "I should have died there. I should have." "You didn't. You think that's something to be proud of?" Her voice cracked. "I screamed. I begged. I would have crawled to their feet and kissed their boots if they asked. They didn't even have to break me. I gave it all away." She shook her head, eyes wet and furious. At herself. "What kind of Luna is that?" Torrin didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a leather-bound file, sealed with the emblem of the Greycloaks, Ashfang's most secretive intelligence branch. "It arrived this morning," he said. "From Belmore." She didn't look up. He tossed it on the bed. The flap unfurled. A faded registration parchment slid free, bearing the seal of the Velmore Bloodline Archive, the same seal that had validated Mireille's noble claim before the Silverflame Council. Except, this one had no record. Mireille Thornell's father, Harold Thornell, had never been inscribed among the noble clans. Not by birth. Not by marriage. Not by right. Torrin's voice was quiet. But hard. "They lied. Her whole claim is forged." Valenne blinked slowly. She didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't breathe. Then, finally. "And what?" she said. What will you do with that truth? Parade it through the capital? Call a new trial? Her laugh was bitter. Hollow. Truth doesn't matter to wolves like them. I wore the Luna crest. I passed the moon mirror right. I was ready. And they buried me anyway. Torrent stepped closer. His tone was steel now. No. They buried someone named Valenne. But they didn't kill the one still here. She turned to him. Her silver hair hung limp against her cheeks, dull and lifeless. Her throat bore the faint sheen of new scar tissue. But her eyes, though red-rimmed, though half-dead, burned. And who is still here? She asked, venom soft and shaking. Tell me. What am I now? You're breathing. Barely. You're thinking. Of how to stop. Torrent's jaw clenched. And then she snapped. Why did you even save me? Her voice rose again, like the storm she no longer believed she had the right to. Why bother? You could have left me in that pit. Buried me with the rest. I would have thanked you for it. He didn't blink. Didn't look away. Because you were the only one who never asked to be chosen, he said. And still, you carried everything like it was yours to bear. I failed. You survived. That's not the same. A long silence. Then, more brokenly. I'm not even angry at them anymore, she whispered. I'm angry at me. I knew no one would come. I knew. So why did I still hope? Torrent inhaled sharply. He sat on the edge of the bed and reached out but didn't touch her. Not yet. Because something in you is still alive. And that scares you more than dying did. She turned away. He watched her shoulders shake. Not from sobs. But from restraint. She would not let herself cry. Not again. Not here. But later, when he left the room. She crawled from the bed, trembling. Crossed to the copper mirror still resting where he'd left it. And with hands that shook like a girl holding a blade for the first time, she lifted it. Just enough to glimpse the edge of her mouth. The corner of her throat. The curve where her Luna mark had once sat. She stared for 5 full breaths. Then dropped the mirror. Not in rage. But in quiet, strangled defeat. I'm nothing, she whispered to no one. Not anymore. Outside the room, Torrent stood at the door. Listening. Knowing she wasn't ready. Not yet. But maybe soon. Because even a broken girl who didn't want to wake had still looked. And that was something. Chapter 16, The Name Beneath the Ashes. The forge at Lethe's edge didn't sing. It groaned. Most called it the Forget-Well, a smithy so old it had sunk into the earth's bones, hidden at the edge of the ash-foam borderlands. Firelight flickered in its cavern mouth like a warning, not a welcome. But Torrent came anyway. He stood before the anvil with a pouch of shattered metal in one hand and a memory on his back. The wolf sigil had once been beautiful, silver gilt, carved with the royal crest of the Luna line, laced in spell-forged runes. Valenne had worn it during her moon mirror rite. It had been clasped to her chest the night Rian swore she was his. Now? Cracked. Blistered. Blackened. She hadn't asked him to bring it. She hadn't asked for anything at all. But he'd gone to her room 2 nights past and found her sitting in the dark, back to the wall, gazing toward the hearth like it whispered her crimes aloud. He hadn't spoken. Just stared at the tiny gleam beneath her palm. The crest. The last piece she'd kept. And when she left for the bathing chamber, he took it. Because he knew what it meant to carry a weight she no longer believed in. The smith at Lethe's edge was an old she-wolf named Brenna Hollowmark, her hands knotted with years and heat, her eyes clouded with molten iron. You sure you want this done? She asked, examining the ruined crest. Some folk die for a mark like this. Torrin didn't hesitate. No more marks. Just, melt it. Make me something small. Plain. Brenna raised a brow. Sentimental? Survival, he murmured. And something quieter. Something rough. Remembrance. Valenne was sleeping when he returned. Or pretending to. The moonlight fell through the window in soft columns, silvering the edges of her breath. Her hair was cleaner now, combed into soft threads, though her arms remained bandaged, and the shadows under her eyes still whispered of sleep that refused to soothe. He set the small wrapped bundle beside her bed and turned to leave. But she stirred. Torrin. Her voice rasped like dry leaves, but she didn't look at him. He paused. I melted it, he said without prompting. Silence. I didn't do it to erase you. Or your past. Or what they called you. He hesitated. I did it because no one should have to wear a name that nearly got them killed. Still nothing. But her fingers twitched beneath the sheets. He unwrapped the cloth and set it gently beside her hand. A ring. No more than a narrow band of darkened copper. Unmarked, unpolished. It bore no crest, no sigil, no rune. Just a single faint inscription inside, barely visible, still here. She didn't touch it. Didn't blink. He stood and stepped away, thinking she'd let it sit. But before he reached the door, her voice came again. Quieter this time. Why a ring? He turned, caught off guard. Her eyes weren't looking at him but at the ring. At what was left. Because the crest was worn for others, he said. This, you wear for you. She said nothing more that night. Later, when even the wind had curled back into silence, Valenne shifted beneath her furs. Her fingers reached out hesitant, pale and brushed the ring. She didn't put it on. Didn't dare. Instead, she closed her hand around it, brought it close, and tucked it beneath her pillow like a child guarding a secret. Then turned away. And cried without sound. The next morning, Torrin found her in the courtyard. She sat alone, back to the sun, arms around her knees. Her hair fluttered in the breeze like the last feather of a broken wing. He didn't say a word. But he saw the faint green tint of copper around her finger. And when she noticed him watching, she pulled her sleeve down. As if it had never been there at all. Back in her room, she stood before the mirror she'd once rejected. And whispered. I'm not the girl who wore the crown. I'm not the one he kissed before the council. I'm not the heir. I'm not the traitor. Her reflection didn't flinch. I'm not anything. But her fingers curled tighter around the ring. And for the first time, she didn't look away. Chapter 17, The Brother of the Crown. The winds in Ashfong Hollow whispered of storms, but inside the Northwatch Hall, silence reigned. Every breath was held. Every eye watched the man at the head of the table, the youngest Veyor with no title, no crest, just a history of exile and a name that still made the old ones flinch. Torrin didn't flinch back. He stood tall beneath the vaulted dome, where soot-darkened wolf statues loomed like silent judges above him. The walls were veined with frost, the hearth unlit deliberately. This was a chamber of truth, not comfort. And tonight, truth would bleed. He tossed a scroll onto the stone table. It unrolled with a snap. A second. A third. Inked vellum covered in bold seals and hidden signatures, sharp and damning. Riant's seal was among them. So was Mireia Thornell's. This is the provisional Luna Pact, Torrin said, voice low but firm. Filed in secrecy beneath the High Council's emergency clause, Clause 17.6. It declares Mireia's coronation valid until the bloodline can be verified in full. He met every gaze. they never verified it. They never intended to. A rustle swept the table. Robes shifting. Hands tightening. One of the elder advisors, Counselor Reese Famler, gray-eyed and still loyal to the ashes of the old court, spoke. You were banished. What gives you the right to question the ruling council? I was banished by my brother, Torin replied, for refusing to back a false Luna. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence cracked around him like thawing ice. Torin stepped closer. Rolled out a final scroll with a slow, deliberate flick of his wrist. The parchment was torn at the edges, its seal broken long ago, but the script was clear, even under the flickering torchlight. A bloodline ledger. One name blotted out. Mirea's father. A bastard scribe with no noble ink. This, he tapped the record, was covered up by Orlin, who was paid in moonstone weight by the Thornell estate the day before Valenne's trial. Another hush. Torin didn't pause. He turned, paced the table, every word slicing cleaner than a blade. We all saw her dragged. We watched her burned. We said nothing while my brother let a girl be marked like a hound for daring to wear the name he gave her. A beat. She begged for his hand in the courtyard. He gave her to the flames. Murmurs rose, quiet, shocked. But no one interrupted. Torin turned to the table's head. There, seated where the eldest Alpha once presided, sat Aina Vareth, former keeper of oaths, now shrouded in grey robes of mourning for a kingdom lost. Her voice was barely more than a breath. What do you ask of us? Torin met her gaze. Reopen the investigation into the Luna trial. Verify Mireia Thornell's bloodline. Exhume the false documents. And restore the name they tried to burn from memory. He paused. Then said it. Valenne Cyralis. The name fell like thunder. Not one dared echo it. Not yet. Later that night, when the council chamber was cleared and the fires had returned to the hall, Torin stood alone by the northern window. The snow fell thick against the stone. His cloak was damp from where the wind had caught him on the parapets, but he hadn't moved in hours. Not until Caliph, his grey-cloaked spymaster, appeared beside him, silent as always. You did well, Caliph murmured. Torin didn't look away from the dark. She still won't eat, he said quietly. Caliph offered a parchment, fresh from the courier lines. A week from now, the Luna vow between Rian and Mireia is set to be sealed. Publicly. With the moonblood kiss. Torin's jaw clenched. His voice was iron. Then in 6 days, I will walk into the Silver Flame Court and show them the body they forgot to bury. Caliph's lips curved. Not a smile, something darker. Approval. And if she won't walk beside you? Torin closed his eyes. He saw silver hair matted in blood. Burned skin. Lips that hadn't trembled when she was broken, only when she whispered apologies to a ghost who betrayed her. He opened his eyes. I won't drag her into this, he said. But I'll carve a path clear enough for her to choose. Back in the grey halls of Ashfang, beneath the mountain's breath, Torin lit a candle in the chapel of old gods. No prayers. Just the silence of a man who'd seen too much mercy weaponized into silence. He didn't kneel. But he looked up into the hollow eyes of the wolf statue above him and whispered. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for the girl who thought death was the only apology she had left to give. And in the shadows behind him, the flame didn't flicker. It roared. Chapter 18, The Girl Who Refused to be Luna. The hall at the heart of Ashfang Keep was not grand. It did not pretend to be. Stone walls bore the scars of centuries, fractures left unpolished, soot stains left to soak into the bone-colored mortar. The long table was uneven and old, thickened with the scent of smoke and damp fur. The torches flickered amber, but the warmth they gave was shallow, shallow as the woman who stood at the far end, arms wrapped tightly across her ribs, as though she could hold her body in place with sheer will alone. Valenne hadn't spoken in 2 days. She had eaten only once. The healing ointments on her back had dried into a dull sheen beneath her tunic, and her silver hair, what remained of it, clung in limp strands to her cheeks. She didn't look at Torin when he entered. She hadn't looked at anyone since the night of the fire drip ritual. But he laid the stack of parchment down before her anyway. One sheet at a time. No dramatic flourish. No speech. Just truth. A ledger. Official death record. Mireille's father, Tobias Thornell, had died 26 years ago in a lowborn Baroque riot outside Velmore. A blueprint. A faded ink drawing of a falsified crest seal, the Veyer sigil bent into Thornell silver. A forgery. A payment trail. Gold mark records of funds paid to Councilman Orlin. Transfers that matched the date of Valenne's blood-stirping trial. Each page a knife. Each line another ghost clawing toward breath. She stared at them for a long time. Torin stood beside her, silent. His arms folded. His expression unreadable. He gave her minutes. Dozens of them. Then, finally, Valenne moved. She picked up the page on bloodline forgery. Her fingers shook. Then she tore it. Deliberately. The parchment ripped in half, and again, and again. Until her hands were full of curling pieces like ash. "This doesn't change anything," she hissed, her voice low and sandpaper rough. "Don't you get it? It's too late." She hurled the remnants across the table, her chest rising fast, breath coming like a thing that wanted to break her. "Where was this when I was on my knees with a collar burning my throat?" she whispered. "Where was this when the people I loved stared and said nothing? Where were you then, Torin?" The way she said his name, it wasn't blame. It was mourning. Torin didn't flinch. "I was in exile," he said simply. "Waiting to be called back to a court that had no intention of letting me live, let alone speak." Her lip trembled. "I am not Luna," she said. "I am not anything. That girl who walked like she was born from a prophecy, who believed her mate's hand would never let go, that girl died on a stone floor, while the court laughed and threw petals at Mireille's feet." Silence. Torin looked at her then, really looked, and something subtle shifted in him. "I'm not asking you to be Luna," he said, quiet. "I'm asking you to tell the truth." Her hands clenched at her sides. Her shoulders shook. "Why?" she whispered. "So the council can ignore it again? So they can call me a madwoman with a scarred throat and delusions of grandeur?" She stepped back from the table. Her voice cracked, like a blade left too long in the fire. "You don't understand. You don't understand what it's like to beg for your name and be told you were never born with one. You don't understand what it's like to be silenced until silence becomes safer than hope." Torin stepped forward. Valenne stiffened. His voice didn't rise, but it hit like steel on steel. "Stop pretending this is about them not listening. It's you. You stopped speaking." A pause. Sharp. Clean. Her eyes glistened. Not from tears, she wouldn't give them that. He stepped closer still, until only a hand's width separated them. "I know what it's like to survive exile," he said softly. "But I don't know what it's like to survive and still wish I hadn't. That's what you're doing, isn't it?" She turned her face away. But Torin reached out, not to touch her, not yet. Just to let the air carry the heat between them. "I saw you," he murmured. "Half dead. Bones showing. Silver chain fused into your skin. And still, you reached for the wall to carve your name." Valenne's breath hitched. "You didn't even know anyone would see it," he said. "But you still wrote it." She pressed a palm to her chest like she was trying to crush the memory out of herself. "I only wrote it," she whispered, because I thought it would be the last time. Torrhen's expression finally broke. His voice dropped, gentled like velvet before thunder. Then let it be the first. She looked up, startled. He didn't back down. You don't have to stand on the steps of Silverflame and proclaim anything. But you can stand. Here. In front of me. Say it. Say you were Luna. Say they lied. Her lips parted. Soundless. I can't, she rasped. You can. I can't, Torrhen. Her voice cracked again. Her knees gave, and she sank into the seat behind her as though her body had finally admitted how little strength she had left. I can't because if I do, it means I deserved better. And I can't live with knowing no one gave it to me. There it was. The shattered, bleeding center of her. Not that she was powerless. But that she believed she was worth nothing better than what had already been taken. Torrhen knelt in front of her, slow and steady. He didn't touch her. He just looked at her like she was the last real thing in a world of dust. Valenne, he said. Let me fight for what you should have had. Just once. Let me be the one who doesn't leave. Tears spilled over her lashes. But still, she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her hand, trembling, broken, reached slowly across the table. Toward the only page she hadn't torn. The one with her name. The old one. The sealed one. She held it for a long time. Then folded it. And tucked it beneath her tunic. Chapter 19, The Hell She Forgot. They told her it wouldn't hurt. They lied. The path to the ritual pool was carved through volcanic stone, slick with silver moss and old heat. Moonlight poured through the jagged ribs of the cavern roof, catching on the shallow ripples of the water that glowed faintly beneath the rock, a sacred liquid known as etherroot, touched by both moons during eclipse tide. It was said to echo a wolf's truth back to them. Valenne wanted to scream at the irony. She didn't. Her voice still felt foreign in her throat, as if every syllable had to be fought through a field of ash. Torrhen walked beside her, silent as ever, his dark braids tied back, jaw set. Not commanding. Not comforting. Just there. She didn't know what that made him. The moon-scarred man waiting at the pool's edge bowed low. The lunar caster, they called him. A soul weaver. Priest of bones and spirit. His arms were marked elbow to wrist and raised, silver ink glyphs that shimmered faintly as he moved. You've come to speak with your wolf, he said in a voice that was not a question. Valenne looked at the water. It was still. Too still. Speak with her wolf. That was laughable. That creature had stopped speaking to her the day she begged for mercy on blood-stained stone and her mate let her scream alone. I don't think she wants to talk, Valenne muttered. The soul weaver inclined his head, his eyes old and soft but not unkind. Then we listen. She stepped into the water. It was cold. Not the clean kind of cold that woke the skin, but the old kind, the ancient kind, the kind that whispered of bones buried beneath roots and promises forgotten. It licked up her legs, climbed her spine. She felt her pulse hiccup in her ears. The lunar caster raised a crystal-dipped staff. You are not being judged, he said quietly. You are being witnessed. Valenne closed her eyes. The pulse of the etherroot flowed through her like a forgotten rhythm. First gentle. Then insistent. Then brutal. She gasped as something broke open inside her. Not flesh. Something deeper. Deeper. She felt her bones flash hot. Her skin ached from within. Her ribs trembled as a pressure unfurled in her chest, a howl trying to form where no sound had lived for months. She choked it down instinctively. The pool shimmered red. The lunar caster's breath caught. His staff hummed against the stone. Torrent stepped forward, alarm flickering in his eyes. "Stop," Valenne rasped. The Soul Weaver didn't. His eyes were on the water, on the runes blooming in ripples across its surface like ink from a severed vein. He spoke low, in the old tongue. "The wolf is alive." Valenne froze. He looked up, eyes sharp with something close to awe and horror. "Her wolf has not died. She has sealed it." A long pause. Then he added, almost whispering, "No magic binds it. No scar. No curse. The wolf is caged not by chains, but by will." Valenne stared at him. Torrent's voice was slow. "What does that mean?" The Soul Weaver exhaled. "It means she could shift. She chooses not to." A silence like thunder. Torrent turned to her, stunned. "Valenne." "I didn't choose anything," she snapped, voice shaking now. "Do you think I want to be like this?" "You are like this," he said gently. "But that isn't the same." Her hands curled into fists. Her shoulders shook. The Soul Weaver's gaze softened. "The wolf's soul listens to the truth you believe," he murmured. "Not the one others tell you. She does not move because she does not believe she is worthy of breath." Valenne laughed. It was a broken, bitter sound. "Then she's smarter than I thought," she whispered. "At least one of us knows when to stop pretending." The runes on the water began to fade. Faint. Flickering. Dimming like the last embers in a long dead hearth. Torrent said nothing. But he didn't look away from her. And she could feel the weight of that silence like hands pressing gently to the cracked center of her ribs. "You think I'm ashamed," she whispered. "You don't understand." Her voice trembled. Her fingers found the line of her throat, where the collar used to rest. "You weren't there," she said. "You didn't see what they did to me. You didn't watch the people I used to rule turn their backs as I was stripped like a dog and called nothing." Torrent's voice was quiet. "I know what they did." She flinched. He stepped to the edge of the water. Not moving to touch her. Just standing within her reach. "You think you're hiding your shame," he said. "But it's not shame I see when you stare at the floor." He leaned forward, eyes dark and steady. "It's grief." Valenne's throat worked. She couldn't swallow. Her breath came shallow, burning at the edges. "I don't want to shift," she whispered. "Not if it means being her again." "The Luna they destroyed." The lunar caster bowed his head. "Then you must find a new name." Torrent said nothing. But later that night, as the pool cooled and the runes vanished into darkness, he brought her a blanket, a drink she didn't touch, and a simple question. "When she's ready," he said softly, "what name should she choose?" Valenne didn't answer. But when she slept that night, her fingers curled faintly not into fists, but around her own heart. And somewhere deep within her, beneath the scorched soil of silence, the wolf stirred. Just once. Enough to whisper, "I'm still here." Chapter 20, The Mate Who Chose Wrong. The wind on the ridgeline of Ashfong carried the scent of storm. It was not the kind that brought rain or mercy. It was the kind that scoured bone. Valenne stood at the edge of the watchtower, wrapped in a heavy gray cloak that smelled faintly of smoke and pine. Beneath it, her bones still ached from the ritual pool. Her voice was rasped into silence, her soul threaded with ash. Behind her, Torrent spoke to the gray-cloaked spies. They murmured like wine through dead trees, quiet and unrelenting. Confirmed. 3 days from now. The Silver Flame Court is preparing the oath stone and blood seal. They've renamed the rite. They call it the binding of the true moon. She will be crowned as Eternal Luna. Valenne didn't turn. She already knew what they would say. Her dreams had whispered at first, before the messengers, before the parchments, before the tremor in Torrent's voice. It was the kind of truth that arrives long before it is spoken aloud. Torrin dismissed the spies. His boots crunched across frost-laced gravel. She didn't move when he approached. Her hand stayed tight around the iron railing. Her fingers had gone numb, but she welcomed the sting. His voice was low. "They're binding in the moon hall." With full council approval. She nodded once. The wind caught her hair and flung it across her face like old silk. "He filed for the Luna mark," Torrin said carefully. "Her name will be etched beside his in the royal line." Still, she said nothing. He waited. She spoke only after the silence began to rot at the edges. He finally got what he wanted. Her voice was soft. Not bitter. Not broken. Just resigned. Torrin's breath caught. Valenne didn't blink. Her gaze remained fixed on the far cliffs, where the twin moons bled pale light across the ruins of the southern range. He studied her, as if waiting for the moment she would shatter. But she didn't. She didn't fall. Didn't flinch. Didn't ask why. It was worse than heartbreak. It was quiet acceptance. "He stood on the steps of the coronation hall," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and told me I was nothing. Not a Luna. Not even a wolf." She turned to him, silver lashes thick with unshed tears. "And now he'll take her to the same place. The same words. The same crown." Torrin's jaw tightened. "She stole your bloodline." Valenne smiled, faint and dry. "He gave it to her." She looked down at her hands, bruised at the knuckles from too many nights gripping stone in silence. Torrin shifted forward. "You don't have to let this stand." She shook her head. "I already did." There was a long pause. The kind that curled into the ribs like cold water. Torrin swallowed. "Valenne, do you still love him?" The wind howled low. She didn't answer immediately. "Instead," she said, "the day they threw me in the pit, he danced." Torrin's breath caught. Her eyes met his. There was no flame in them now. No desperation. Only ash. "I don't love him," she said. "I don't feel anything that soft. Not anymore." She turned away again. Her voice was thinner now. "But I remember." He nodded, slow and sharp. Then he stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough that the heat of his body disrupted the cold pressing around her spine. "I'm calling the council," he said. She blinked. "What?" "I've already filed the petition. As the elder blood of the royal line. I'm demanding a tribunal investigation into the binding ceremony, the false records, and Mireille's claim." Valenne stared at him. "You filed it in your name?" Torrin nodded. "They won't listen to yours yet." The yet hit harder than any slap. She laughed once, bitter. "So you'll fight in my place now? Wear the chain and bleed for me?" He didn't smile. "I'll do what you can't. Until you can." Her throat tightened. "And when they laugh in your face," she whispered. "Then I'll burn the chair they sit on," Torrin said softly. The wind ripped through the watchtower. Valenne's voice shook. "Why?" Torrin looked at her. Not her scars. Not her silence. Not the faded girl who used to wear a crown. Just her. He said, "Because you died, thinking you had to apologize for it." Silence. Then, at last, her shoulders trembled. But she didn't break. She turned back to the ridgeline and stood with him in the wind. Her voice, when it came again, was smaller. "Promise me something." "Anything." She didn't look at him. "Don't ask me to come back." He didn't. He only stood beside her until the moons were high and the sky turned silver with sorrow. And neither of them said that coming back wasn't the hardest thing. It was believing she was ever allowed to. Chapter 21, The Trial They Denied Her. The lowlands reeked of old power and wet stone. The council chamber was carved into the cliffside, a yawning cavern veined with iron-rooted columns and chiseled moons. No windows. No light but the eerie blue flame that hovered above each elder's seat. A crescent throne for each, 5 silver-backed chairs, none truly empty. The shadows that loomed across the stone floor were not made of bodies but of names. Of centuries. Of wolves who once ruled with tooth and howl. And today, one dared to return. Torren Bayer entered the council alone. No entourage. No trumpet. No banner. Just ash-dusted boots, a war-split coat, and eyes that had once wept over a corpse no one mourned. He crossed the marble threshold with a parchment case slung over one shoulder, black hair still damp from travel, the scent of pine fire clinging to him like defiance. Elder Corwin's voice was the first to strike. "State your grievance, exile." The word hung heavy. Exile. Torren didn't flinch. He stopped at the foot of the central dais and unslung the case. The leather was cracked with age, but the seals were new, stamped in wax with the twin moons, the mark of sovereign challenge. "I stand," he said, his voice even but unflinching, "not as a rebel, but as the blood brother of the reigning Alpha." The council stirred. "I present documented falsification of royal lineage," he continued, opening the case with calm precision. "Forgery of heritage, paid silence of scribes, and a binding ritual predicated on treason." He placed the parchments one by one upon the stone table, each with a weight that echoed louder than any word. "This," he said, holding up a blood-sealed scribe's confession, "proves Mireia Thornell's lineage was altered by Orlin of Velmore, 3 years before the moon mirror rite." A low murmur began. Torren didn't stop. "This," he laid another scroll down, "shows her father died in exile with no noble bloodline recognized by any circle. No crest. No ancestral rights. The supposed Thornell house was crafted from ink and ambition." Another scroll. This one older. Frayed at the corners. "And this is the reversed register of Luna Ascension." The name Valenne Cyralis was blotted out after the rite was completed. Not before. A retrospective erasure. He stepped back. "And I submit under oath of first blood that the trial which condemned Valenne was not justice. It was murder disguised as ceremony." Silence. Cold. Endless. Then Elder Corwin exhaled, slow and sharp. "You seek to overturn a Luna binding. I seek truth. The rite has already passed." Torren's voice dropped an octave. "So had her pulse, and I brought her back anyway." Corwin's expression twisted. "Blood alone does not make a Luna," said another elder. "She forfeited her place." "She was silenced," Torren snapped. "You made her kneel in chains and burnt her throat closed. She never spoke a single word in her own defense. She was unfit." Torren's fists clenched. "She believed that because you made her believe it." Corwin stood. The others followed, a cold tide of tradition rising in flesh. "The decision is final. The right is law. We do not turn back time." "You turned it," Torren growled, "the moment you let wolves be ruled by a lie." Corwin's eyes narrowed. "Do not raise your voice in this hall, Alpha." "Then maybe it's time someone held loud enough to shake your ceilings," Torren snapped. He stepped forward, eyes burning with something feral, something ancient. "If this council does not strip the stolen title from a woman whose claim is built on corpses and gold," he said, "then you do not serve the wolves. You serve rot. And if you continue down this path," Corwin warned, voice low, "you will be branded as traitor again. This time, no exile. Just dust." Torren didn't blink. "Then brand me." He turned, cloak flaring behind him like a blade drawn in defiance. I'll wear the mark if it means she doesn't have to bleed anymore for you to believe she was real." And then he left. No one followed. But someone had already arrived. Hidden in the alcove behind the old stone curtain, beneath the council's carved observation balcony, a figure crouched in shadow. Wrapped in a grey shawl, her breath stilled at every word. She had slipped in before dawn, brought by one of the Ashfong sentries through a secret passage older than the hall itself. Her fingers were curled around a stone pillar, white-knuckled. Her throat ached, not from pain, but from the burn of silence. Valenne had not meant to come. Had not meant to listen. But when she heard his voice, not Riant's, not the one who named her liar, not the one who danced on her grave, but the brother who stood alone and named her living. Something cracked. The council chamber blurred. She pressed her forehead to the stone, breathing harshly through tears that would not stop. He stood for me. Not for the crown. Not for glory. For me. No one had done that. Not once. Not even before. She had screamed her innocence once, but no one heard. She had begged for her name back, but no one listened. Until now. Not to love her. But to see her. And that, somehow, hurt more than love ever did. She stayed in the shadows long after Torin had gone, breathing in the echoes of the chamber, letting herself fall apart in a place where no one could see. Only the moonlight saw her. And the broken name still resting beneath her skin. Chapter 22, the name she carved back. Ash still clung to the corners of the hall. And the forge glowed, not with rage, but remembrance. The ember's teal furnace, deep within the heart of the Ashen Vale, had not burned a royal emblem in nearly a decade. Not since the last true Luna had walked its black stone floor, her wolf crest shattered, her name buried beneath smoke and lies. Tonight, it breathed again. Valenne stood by the entrance, silent, arms folded tight around her ribs like she was trying to hold herself from shattering again. She wore no silks. No silver. Just charcoal gray linen, heavy from the heat, sleeves rolled to her elbows, collar still frayed from the scars that refused to heal fully. The blacksmith looked up from the anvil, his broad shoulders slick with sweat, eyebrows furrowed in quiet reverence. He did not ask questions. He had seen the glint of fire once before in a dying girl's eyes. Now it was back. Torin stood beside the forge, hands bare, sleeves blackened with soot. The soft clatter of bronze shavings rang around them as he lowered a small, battered box onto the coals. Inside lay a fragment of gold mottled, heat-warped, jagged at the edges. The last piece of her crown. "Valenne," he said, voice hushed, as if even the embers might be listening. "This was yours once." She didn't answer. Only watched. Watched as the metal was turned and pressed into a mold he had carved himself, by hand, in silence, over days spent awake while she lay haunted in fever dreams. Watched as the piece was cooled in an oil of moonroot and iron petals, then lifted with tongs as fine as hair. The imprint wasn't of a royal crest. Not the Luna sigil. Not the crescent-winged seal that once hung over every throne. Just a name. 5 letters, curved like wolf claw, edged like memory. Valenne. "It's not for others," Torin said as he placed the seal in her palm. "It's not to mark territory. Not to demand loyalty. It's not for them." He stepped closer, brushing the soot from her fingers as she stared down at the warm copper. "It's for you." She looked up slowly. Her eyes glistened, but there were no tears. Only that old, exhausted fire, flickering for the first time like it might burn again. "I don't," her voice cracked. "I'm not that name anymore." "You carved it first," Torin said gently. "Long before they tried to erase it." She trembled, her hand curling protectively around the seal, as if afraid someone would rip it away again. "I was Luna," she whispered. "And then I was nothing. No name, no wolf, no voice. Just a girl crawling in a pit, too ashamed to die. Torrin exhaled, the sound slow and raw. Then let this be the first thing you choose. Not as Luna. Not as heir. Just as Valenne. The flames shifted behind her, catching the thin curve of her jaw. Her profile was all shadow and scar but beautiful in a way only broken things could be. She turned to the forge, slowly, her fingers still wrapped around the copper seal. One step forward. Another. The forge's breath curled around her like a memory. Her silver hair, cropped too close, caught the light and shimmered faintly like ghosts of moonlight long denied. She bent over the anvil. The silence deepened. And then, without a word, she pressed the stamp into the fabric over her heart. Just above the sternum. A firm, quiet motion. She didn't flinch. When she lifted it away, the fabric bore the seal's mark, not deep, not screaming but there. And hers. She stepped back, letting the copper cool against her palm. Her throat worked like she was swallowing something old and bitter. Her voice came out low, hoarse. "I don't believe in thrones anymore," she murmured. "And I'll never believe them again." She lifted her eyes to Torrin. "But I believe you." The forge hissed as the fire cracked. Behind her, the light danced along the floor like a rising hell, flickering across stone, smoke, and her figure now squared to the flame. Her shadow stretched long across the wall. A woman cloaked in scars, fire-lit, with the name they tried to bury branded back upon her chest, not with pride, not with arrogance, but with choice. And Torrin, standing there in the flickering dark, knew then what he had always suspected. She wasn't just the Luna they had betrayed. She was the moon they had no right to orbit. Chapter 23, The Flame She Brought Back. The wind changed when she stepped across the border. It was not the kind of wind that scattered leaves or whispered omens through the trees. It was the kind that stirred dust from the forgotten, a hush that swept across the plains and climbed the spine of every watching wolf, an ancestral shiver born not of fear, but memory. Valenne wore gray. Not the silver she was once wrapped in like silk and promise, nor the crimson of rituals past. This was the ash-gray garb of the forsaken, the robe of the nameless, the war orphan, the soul without crest or bloodline. Its hem dragged behind her like the trail of smoke after a burned city. Around her finger, the iron ring of the unclaimed. On her chest, the faint press of a copper seal, hidden beneath folds of linen. No one could see it, but she could feel it, warm still against her heart. The name she had rechosen. Valenne. Not heir. Not Luna. Just Valenne, walking toward the wolves who had buried her. They gathered slowly at first. Peasants from the outposts. Market-goers. Couriers who stopped mid-step and dropped baskets of ink-stained scrolls. Mothers clutching children who pointed with wide eyes and whispers of "She's dead, I saw her burn." But there she was. Walking. Living. Unbent. A woman once named a myth, now returning, cloaked in the very color of her grave. Behind her, Torrin rode at the front of the procession, the gray flame standard unfurled beside him. 60 of his fiercest riders flanked them in silence, iron-armored and ember-eyed, their blades still crusted from the wilds they'd passed through to get here. They had not come to ask. They had come to escort her home. The guards at the city gate faltered. One made the mistake of lowering his halberd toward her. It clanged uselessly off the raised forearm of a gray flame soldier, who said nothing, only stared through his helm until the gate parted. The crowd thickened as they entered the outer ring of the Silver Flame capital. The smell of lavender oil, smoke, and panic. Nobles watched from balconies, lips tight, trying to place the face they'd watched burned on a pyre. And there she was. Not hidden. Not ashamed. Her steps were slow, deliberate, like she was counting every heartbeat between here and justice. By the time they reached the Parliament gates, the plaza was full. hundreds, perhaps thousands, now whispered her name. Not as a curse. Not as a martyr. As a question. Is that really her? But they said she died. They said she confessed. They lied. Torrin dismounted and turned toward the crowd, voice rising like thunder across marble. The blood of the crown was never extinguished. The Luna was never judged. We are here not for war, but for what was denied. A voice. A trial. The truth. Then he turned to her, and didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Valenne stepped forward. The doors of the great hall of judgment opened. She crossed the threshold as every gaze fixed on her, some in horror, some in awe, some in quiet, paralyzing shame. She did not bow. She did not plead. She simply walked, each step slow, each inhale trembling, as if she could feel the burn still laced into her lungs. And beneath the fabric at her chest, the copper ring pulsed with warmth. Her own words, spoken only to herself, barely above a breath, drifted through the hush. This time. I'm not here for them. I'm not here for a crown. I came back for me. In the hallway beyond, the marble still bore her blood from months ago, scrubbed, but not forgotten. She saw it in the cracks. In the discoloration where they'd tried too hard to erase. No one could ever clean betrayal. Torrin reached for her, as if to brace her elbow. She shook her head softly and continued alone. In that moment, she looked taller than she'd ever been on a throne. Not because she wore power. But because she carried pain like a torch, and refused to let it burn her hollow again. Behind her, the city stirred like a beast waking beneath twin moons. The wind picked up, carrying not ash, but the scent of something rekindling. Not vengeance. Not even justice. Dignity. The kind that does not beg to be recognized. It demands it by simply walking back through the fire. Chapter 24, The Trial of the Burned Girl. There was no fire in the Moonstone Hall. And yet, Valenne felt her skin sear again the moment she stepped beneath its arches. The trial chamber was shaped like a perfect circle, open to the sky where Luna Prima glared above them like a pale, judging eye. Beneath that eternal gaze, 5 elder seats rose on carved obsidian dais, weathered men and women draped in council silver. Beside them, representatives of each major bloodline stood in cold, assessing silence. Cloaks of midnight blue. Armor polished to cruelty. No one spoke. No one blinked. At the center, a hollowed well of stone and light. It was into that circle of judgment Valenne walked, cloaked in ash gray and silence. Torrin stood behind her, his expression unreadable but his presence aflame against her back. He had offered to speak first. She had said no. Across from her, dressed in moon-silver ceremonial garb, sat Mireia, golden curls pinned like a crown, lips curled like poison. Beside her, in the robes of Alpha Sovereign, stood Rian. Rian, who had once pressed his mouth to her bare shoulder beneath moonlight. Rian, who had watched her bleed from a ceremonial whip and looked away. Rian, who had married her throne to a lie. And yet he stood tall, collected, calm, a statue sculpted in duty. Valenne raised her chin. I bring 4 charges. Her voice was clear. Raw at the edges, like something reborn through flame and salt. She didn't raise it. She didn't need to. The silence leaned in. 1. Regal deception. 2. Bloodline falsification. 3. Deliberate entrapment of a Luna heir. 4. Mental and spiritual degradation with intent to destroy wolf identity. A ripple swept through the outer ring of dignitaries. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others crossed their arms. Only High Seer Anvera, blind but eerily attentive, tilted her head like she'd already heard the ending in the wind. Valenne continued. My body bears the marks. My throat, she reached slowly, pulling down her collar, revealing the burned silver scar at her windpipe, bears the collar of betrayal. My soul was severed from my wolf. Not by magic. Not by fate. But by them. She did not look at Rian. Not yet. Instead, she turned, and with gloved fingers laid upon the stone table 6 parchments, 2 blood seals, and 1 fragment of her shattered Luna crest, the one she had carried from the ashes. Every document they used to crown her was a forgery. Every oath spoken in my name was made as I lay dying in their cells. At last, she met his eyes. Rian's gaze flinched. Not outwardly. But the way his fingers curled at his sides, the way his jaw flexed, she saw it. And you, Rian Veyer. You stood above me when I was bound to the plaza floor. You watched when they forced my knees down with blades. You let them smear my blood like ink on their story. And now you say you were following order? He opened his mouth. His voice was smooth. You misunderstand. I followed law. The Luna Rite demanded evidence. I did not. Valenne laughed. Not loud. Not cruel. But low and disbelieving, like a wind through bone. Did the law kiss me on the roof that night? Did the law tell me I was chosen? He flinched. Mireia looked ready to snap her nails. Valenne stepped closer. Her voice softened, as if speaking to something fragile. Do not speak of order. Order did not brand my throat. Order did not whisper, you belong to me, and then cast me aside. You did. And you did it with silence. Torin, at the edge of the circle, stood utterly still. It was not rage that moved her. Not anymore. It was the echo of something once beautiful, now broken in the shape of justice. I do not stand here because I want the throne back. I do not want their banners. Or the crown. Or your mouth at my neck again. She let the silence breathe. Then she said, softer than ever. But you took from me the one thing no Luna should ever lose, the right to be believed. A hush fell so sharp it could have split stone. Valenne stepped back. Her breath trembled, but her hands did not. She turned one last time, gaze sweeping every elder, every noble, every wolf who had ever looked down on her, and nodded as the flames rose higher. It was never that I was unworthy of the crown. Her eyes burned, not with fire, but clarity. It's that you. She looked at Rian. Were never worthy of my trust. Behind her, Torin exhaled, almost a prayer. And across the chamber, the first of the long-robed elders leaned forward. Let the council recess, Elder Corwin murmured. Let us weigh the fire. Chapter 25, The Soul She Didn't Need Permission to Wake. The wind was silent on the cliffs of the Moon Soul altar, as if even the heavens held their breath. Beneath the fractured spires of the old King's Basin, the world waited. No fire, no crown, no witness but stone and sky, and herself. Valenne stood at the edge of the ceremonial pool, wrapped in a shroud of pale ash cloth. The air smelled of cooled silver and wet stone. Her bare feet pressed against the carved sigils in the marble, once meant only for kings. Her hair, no longer hidden, tumbled loose over her scarred shoulders like threads of stormlight. She had refused the ceremonial robes. Refused Torin's protective presence within the circle. This trial is mine, she had whispered. He'd said nothing. Only watched her with those impossible eyes, eyes that burned for her, even when she couldn't burn for herself. Now she stood alone. Except she wasn't. From the far side of the circle, a hooded figure approached, the Soul Seer. His robes trailed across the cracked lunar mosaic, fingers stained with ink and old blood. He carried no staff, no relic. Only a bowl of black water. A mirror cut from the sky. He did not ask her if she was ready. He simply poured. The water fell in thick, ink-dark rivulets into the hollowed altar basin, and as it filled, the surface shimmered like liquid glass. Valenne inhaled. Then stepped in. The world collapsed around her like wings folding inward. Silence roared. Time bent. And suddenly, she was no longer standing on stone. She was kneeling in dirt. The air was wet with rain and copper. The scent of iron chains. She looked down. And saw herself, years younger, skin unbroken but eyes dead, on her knees in the plaza, wrists bruised and mouth open in a silent scream. A whip cracked. Another illusion flickered, a room of stone and herbs, her own body writhing under restraints as a needle plunged into her throat. The drug burned like betrayal. Then another, the mirrored corridor, her reflection smeared with soot and shame, her once proud crest shattered across the floor. She watched them all. And she didn't flinch. One final vision bled into being. It was herself again, gaunt, collapsed in a muddy ditch, trembling with fever. That version of Valenne crawled, sobbed, whispered incoherent apologies into the dirt. "I'm sorry. I should have known. I shouldn't have believed." Valenne stepped forward. Not away. Toward. Her knees bent. Her palm reached. And slowly, steadily, she took her own trembling hand in hers. "You are not shame," she whispered. The girl in the mud froze. "You are not what they said. You are not burned. You are alive. And I am done asking for permission to exist." The shadows behind them held, every face that had spat on her, every voice that had called her traitor, liar, Luna pretender, they shrieked and fell into black. Valenne rose. So did the other her. They merged in firelight. And suddenly, she was standing once more at the altar. Breathless. Shaking. But whole. And then the world split. A soundless quake rattled the ceremonial circle. The sigils beneath her feet cracked, bleeding white flame. Wind lashed through the cliffs. And from behind her, no, within her, came the presence she had abandoned. Her wolf. Not the one they taught her to tame. Not the one they shamed into silence. This wolf emerged from the fractured pool in a ripple of silver light and ash. She was tall. Elegant. A great she-wolf cloaked in threads of ghost fire, with fur the color of sorrow and storm clouds, and eyes like molten gold staring through centuries of silence. She didn't howl. She didn't bare her teeth. She stood. Still. Proud. Unyielding. The altar cracked again. And Valenne stepped forward to meet her. They stared at one another. No words. No bonds. No apology. Only recognition. And in that moment, the fire returned. Not to consume. But to remember. When she stepped back into the waking world, the soul seer fell to his knees. Torrin caught her before she collapsed. Her forehead pressed against his chest, and for the first time in moons, she did not fight the contact. He didn't speak. Not even when her fingers slowly curled into his shirt. Her voice, when it came, was smoke wrapped in steel. "She's back." His arms held tighter, reverent. "She never left. You just stopped looking." Valenne exhaled. Her head tilted back. Her silver lashes trembled. Not anymore. Chapter 26, The One Who Named Herself. The wind across the council plaza was a breath before the storm, too still, too expectant, too sharp. Thousands gathered in silence. Not the silken hush of ceremony, but the brittle, trembling silence of those who had heard whispers too wild to believe, and yet found themselves unable to look away. From the carved balconies of the Silver Flame Palace, from the outer courts of the Moonfang clans, even from the outermost reaches of the Velmore Confederacy, they came. Because she was here. Not a ghost. Not a traitor. Not a crownless girl dragged back in chains. Valenne Cyralla stood beneath the sun that had once witnessed her execution, the one her people had mistaken for mercy when it lit her pyre. She wore grey. No silks. No sigils. Just a robe cut from the same ashcloth as the prisoners who had vanished in the bones of the dungeons. Her arms were bare, marked with the slow healing of burned skin, and her throat, once veiled in shadow, was exposed in full. The scar there gleamed pale and wicked in the daylight, a silver brand where the iron had melted and seared her name away. Now she returned to name herself. The plaza's center was marked by the old lunar seal, a shallow circle of obsidian set into the stone. Once, kings knelt there to swear by moon and flame. Once, she had been pushed into it, hands bound, voice silenced. Now she stepped into it by choice. In her palm, she held no scepter. No crown. Only the fresh forged brand, a mark hammered from her broken crest, reforged in Torrent's fire. A wolf curling into a ring of flame, not silver, not gold, but iron dyed in ash. The forge mark of the unburned. She bent to one knee. Not in submission, but in wait. In memory. She pressed the iron ring to the bare fabric over her heart. I do not return as Luna, she said, voice steady, low, bruised from years of silence. I do not return to reclaim what was taken. I return to speak what was never allowed. The words rippled across the square like thunder that came too late. This is not my recrowning. This is my reclaiming. She lifted the brand high, and the midday sun struck it like a bell. I am Valenne Cyralis, daughter of wolf and moon. Scarred. Burned. Forgotten. But never erased. The wolves of the gathered clans stirred, murmur swelling like a coming tide. Some looked away. Some bowed their heads. But others, the young, the broken, the once exiled, met her gaze. They saw her. Not the Luna she had been. The flame that refused to die. She turned. Torrent stood at the edge of the circle, flanked by the grey flame guard. His braids were wind-tossed, his eyes shadowed with heat and something far gentler, something he never allowed anyone else to see. He carried no sword. No command. Only his presence. When she walked to him, the crowd parted as if the weight of her truth burned the stone itself. Her steps were slow. But no longer hesitant. Torrent did not speak first. She stopped just in front of him, close enough that their shadows crossed. She looked up, eyes soft with iron. Now, she said, you asked me once if I'd let you stand beside me. A heartbeat. I will. A pause. Then. But not as Alpha. Not as protector. Not even as the one who pulled me from the ashes. She stepped forward. Placed one hand flat over his chest, where his heartbeat thundered against her touch. As the one I choose. Torrent inhaled, as if her fingers pressed into more than skin, as if she reached into marrow and memory. He didn't answer with words. He reached up, cupped her face as if it were porcelain wrapped in fire, and kissed her brow. Not possessive. Not proud. But reverent. She turned again. Torch in hand, the grey flame torch she had carried from the edge of Ashfong, its light a deeper hue than silver, a dusk-colored flame that consumed but did not blind. One by one, she walked to the pillars that bore the forged lineage scrolls, the false documents Mireia had used to ascend. With calm, exacting grace, she laid the torch to each. They curled black, turned to ash, and crumbled in her wake. The watchers did not cheer. They wept. Not for her. But for themselves, for the years of silence, for the truths buried, for the voices that had once been hers and now echoed through her flame. By nightfall, the plaza was dark save one burning bowl, and her silhouette, tall and quiet against it. She did not kneel again. She did not raise her voice. She only stood. And the world listened. Not because she demanded it. But because she no longer needed permission to be heard. Chapter 27, The Queen Who Didn't Need a Throne. Dawn cracked across the spires of Ascent Mountain, slicing gold into the mist, setting fire to the frost-laced peaks like a promise that did not need to be spoken aloud. On the highest platform of the moonring altar, where once only kings stood, she waited barefoot. Not crowned. Not chained. Simply still. Her silver hair fell loose, windswept across her shoulders like the final veil lifting from a name too long buried. Her robes were midnight gray, lined with ash thread embroidery, the sigil of the unburned. No medal adorned her. No wolf bowed beside her. And yet every eye turned to her. Because she had walked through death and returned not with vengeance, but with the one thing wolves forgot could be louder than fire. Grace. Around her, wolves from every bloodline had gathered in concentric rings. The Velmore scouts in their forest cloaks. The Ember Hollow remnants with soot-dark scars down their jaws. The Lumbreak exiles, once banished, now drawn back by a name whispered in rebellion, _Valenne is alive _. No throne stood behind her. No crown waited before her. Only flame, the grey fire bowl lit at the altar's edge, flickering with the same light she had carried across the kingdoms. That fire did not roar. It whispered. Like breath in a throat that remembered how to speak. Torrin stood in the shadowed arc of the altar steps, unmoving, unreadable. His jaw was tight. His hands were loose at his sides, ready for nothing, yet aching for everything. He had not followed her to the top. Because she had asked for space. Let me speak for all of us she had told him. And now, she would. She lifted her chin. Her voice was wind-soft, yet it silenced the gathering like thunder. You thought I was dead. A hush fell so still that it seemed even the moons paused in their twin orbits. I thought I was dead too. Her eyes, pale as storm-washed snow, swept the crowd like a blade that did not wound. But I woke up. Her hand reached up to her throat, not to hide the scar, but to touch it. A quiet gesture. A defiant one. And if I can, so can you. Murmurs rippled. A weeping sound from the back. A whisper of _she's real _. She stepped forward, no armor, no guards, and knelt. To the people. Not to the crown. To those who had been beaten, silenced, buried and forgotten. You were told to look away when the fire came. You were told silence was strength. You were told survival meant obedience. Her voice did not rise. It sank. Right into the gut of every wolf who'd ever watched a sister taken. A child shamed. A truth rewritten. But I am here. And I remember. She looked up, not with pain, but steel. I will remember all of you. Even the parts you burned to survive. No cheering broke out. No applause. Only breath. Deep, aching, reverent breath, the kind wolves took when a full moon pulled their blood tight and their hearts too full to howl. She rose to her feet, turned, and picked up the torch. One final time. She walked to the center of the ring, and knelt before a basin carved into the altar floor. There, etched in gold leaf and bone, was the symbol of the first Luna, the one lost to war, devoured by silence. Without trembling, Valenne pressed the torch into the basin. Flame flared. And then went out. The silence that followed cracked open something bigger than grief. A new beginning. She turned to Torrin then, her hand extended, not in plea, not in politics, but an invitation. His boots whispered across the ancient stone. His palm met hers. Their fingers twined. And he let her lead. Down the steps. Off the altar. Into the people. Not to rule. But to walk among. They passed the priests in silver robes who once had buried her name. They passed the elders who'd voted for her execution. They passed Rian, still silent in his polished armor, unable to meet her gaze. She did not spit at him. She did not speak to him. She simply walked on. And with each step, wolves turned and followed. Not to chase, but to be led. By a girl who had burned. And returned. And chose not a throne, but them. At the edge of the altar's platform, the final sunlight caught on her scars. It painted her jaw in gold, her mouth in dusk. She looked out once more. You can lose everything, she whispered, and still choose to live like it matters. Her fingers tightened in torrents. You can lose the war and still win your name. A beat of silence. Then, one hell. Then another. Then 100. Until the mountain shook with the sound of wolves who had been quiet too long. And above it all, in the burnished hush of the morning sky, stood the queen who didn't need a throne. She had fire. She had truth. She had her name. And now, they would never forget it again.